I wanted to start, and I don't know if LonerBox, you have a particular view about how we should begin. If so, I'll defer to you. But I kind of just wanted to start by understanding what we mean by anti-Semitism and like making sure we're not speaking past each other.
Okay. Um, I think when I come to defining anti-Semitism, I think the IHRA definition is basically fine. It seems to be like the most used one. I think it leaves plenty of caveats in there to exempt standard critics of Israel or even aggressive critics of Israel. But I think it also is privy to the nuance of the way that like anti-Zionism can reach an overlap with anti-Semitism and how it can actually uh, express itself in that form. So I'm happy to to defend the IHRA definition and maybe to
Yeah,
also.
I don't have a problem with you like using that definition. Like I just think
Mhm.
that there's been like so much conversation about like whether or not my definition is correct or something. And that's where I'm like,
Okay.
I don't think that they're like, I'm using Merriam-Webster, and I
Mhm.
think what I understand to be at least one plausible common understanding of anti-Semitism, and that is that it's hostility towards or discrimination against Jews as a religious, ethnic, or racial group. And so I just wanted to first, like, yeah, we can get into the into your definition, which I think is a certain perception of Jews, including prejudice or hostility or something like that. But I just first wanted to like get agreement that like the definition that I'm providing isn't proprietary language. It's not something that's like so out there. It's a commonly used definition.
Yeah, so I even wrote your definition here when it was asked because there was a clip of it, and I
Yeah.
think maybe I'm wrong, but it's you saying I take anti-Semitism as indexed to individuals to be essentially prejudice or mental bias against someone on account of their Judaism
Mm-hmm.
and or a person who commits some non-trivial amount of discriminatory acts on the basis of Judaism. And I guess when we say Judaism, we also acknowledge that like religious hatred of Jews specifically is kind of antiquated. Like anti-Semitism, especially for the last 100 years or so, has basically been like an ethnic attack as well. That's why conversion
Yeah.
didn't save you if you were a Jew in Europe. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't actually have an issue with this definition because but again, I have a very like hostile view of dictionary definitions. I think we tend to learn most words in life by not really appealing to them. Like we don't really get a definition and just go out into the world and start picking out the things that are X and things that are not X. Like when we're kids, we learn from examples. We point at things and that's a chair. That's not a chair, even though it's got four legs and a back. Like so. I think with like the application of your definition is the thing I was taking issue with.
Mm. So
We can start there if you
yeah,
want.
I'd love to because I think that a lot of has been made over this like, we use extreme hypotheticals in the context of a lot of these discussions, and Avi, like you of all people understand this, that you can clip someone poorly using like these extreme
Yeah.
hypotheticals. And so something was asked to me, which is basically, would you say that Holocaust denialism is inherently anti-Semitic? And when I say no to that, all I mean to say there is that the definition that I provided, and frankly, I think arguably your definition as well, although we can talk about that, it's just not the definition itself. Not that I wouldn't automatically assume that someone who is that's denying the Holocaust is anti-Semitic. And as we talked about with another caller with Avi, that might be an empty set. It might be that there's no person who denies the Holocaust who isn't anti-Semitic. But I don't think that my definition commits me to any position on like how you would go about proving anti-Semitism, or commits me to any like weird situation there where I wouldn't obviously call, for example, like Hermann Goering an anti-Semite. Of course, I would call Hermann Goering an anti-Semite, and that would follow. Avi, you sounds like you want to say something.
Or even any anti-Zionist. Like, so for example, you can have. So here's what I think what has happened. I think what's happened is when a couple of things has happened. I think one thing that's happened is I know what so someone like me, I know what you mean when you say in a discussion, no, you have to understand, like, just so we're clear, the important part about my definition of anti-Semitism is denying the Holocaust is not necessarily anti-Semitic. Like, I remember that, and I muted my mic, and I could not stop laughing. in that conversation.
Yeah.
And the reason is because I know what you mean, but when I heard you say that, I know how so many normies and so many people are going to take that. They're going to be horrified.
Yeah. No, but
And-
you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I do understand what you're saying. You're basically getting it. Yeah, it in the scope of logical possibility, it is at least possible. Although even it might the probability may be zero even, but it's logically possible to have, like, for example, if someone like
Wait, can we do that example?
Right
Wait. Can we do the one do it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we could do whatever. I don't have that example offhand. I was going to use me as an example.
Go for it.
Yeah. So like if someone opened up my head and took out the part of my brain, like went into the part of my brain that has like the memory of my education about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and just zap that, and like my memory of learning about the Holocaust is gone. All those parts of memory is gone, but everything else I'm the same. And then if someone asks me like, "Hey, do you believe in the Holocaust?" I'm like, "What? What do you mean? Like, huh? Like, I think you're just making this up." Like that would look pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I don't think in that situation anyone would say that I'm anti-Semitic in virtue of that. However, like the disconnect, and so that's true. Like,
I want to ask LonerBox, is that true on his view? Do you agree that under the definition you use, or under, I guess I'll ask on that Avi in that situation would not be anti-Semitic?
Yeah, of course. Like, I'm not going to call someone with Tourette's racist if they call a black person the N-word.
Right. So I think that we agree. So in other words,
yeah.
What I'm trying to say is, I think you and I agree. I don't think that there's anything different about LonerBox's position on anti-Semitism given that example. Now, in the definition, there might be some disparities, but as applied in that example, LonerBox wouldn't call that person anti-Semitic. I wouldn't call that person anti-Semitic. And Avi, you wouldn't call that person anti-Semitic.
I would not call myself anti-Semitic in that hypothetical. No.
And but we all agree on that. So that's why, like, yeah, it sounds bad, but you know what I mean, and we agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and so here's where I think the disconnect is. I think the disconnect is number one, I think it sounds like when you give this, even though it doesn't commit you, so you're right, it does not commit you to an evidentiary standard.
Correct.
You can take that definition and you can have very low evidentiary standards. Now, there's a question about whether you do have low evidentiary standards or high evidentiary standards, but you can have that view that about what anti-Semitism is, and you could also just see any slight bit of evidence and be like, oh my gosh, they're an anti-Semite. And have the view that every anti-Zionist is an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
Because out of a low evidentiary standard. Now, I don't think you have a low evidentiary standard, but you can. You're not committed to it. And so the disconnect there is, I think it sounds like when you have this, when you're communicating it in this way, where you say where it says things like that, some people listening might get the impression that you're setting this impossible standard, like this practically, or this extremely high standard, because like, oh my gosh, he's saying Holocaust denial isn't
yeah, why would even Hitler be anti-Semitic?
Yeah, like who is anti-Semitic? How would you even go about showing someone is anti-Semitic?
No, I get the impression, but when I clarify after Avi, and I say, guys, I would presume anyone who denies the Holocaust is an anti-Semite, I feel like anyone who listens to both parts of that listens first to the statement about what I think anti-Semitism is, and then the statement, but of course, I presume that it's, over and above any standard, that people who deny the Holocaust are anti-Semitic, that at least to people who are usual in these conversations or who understand at least something about them, that that should clear up that the evidentiary bar is not this, denying Goebbels is even anti-Semitic.
Right. So you would say like Holocaust denial, if someone just said, hey, you learned about this aspect about this person, they deny the Holocaust, you would say that is extremely strong evidence.
Correct.
Extremely strong evidence they're anti-Semitic, to the point where I strongly believe it.
Yes. And I think you would too. And I think LonerBox would too, right? I think we're all aligned on that. What I'm concerned with, though, and the reason why we went there, and I want to get Loner's sort of approach on this, is because I think there are people who baked into their definition of anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism. And there is some, I think, obfuscation regarding that, or some people who want to, instead of clarifying what they mean by anti-Semitism, they want to bake in the anti-Zionism into the definition itself, and by doing that, define anti-Semitism in terms of anti-Zionism.
But who are these people? Like, I know people on TV who do this, but like the IHRA doesn't do that. The Jerusalem Declaration doesn't do that, right?
It's not clear to me, right? Because in the at least one of those definitions, I think they define denial of Israel's quote unquote right to exist as anti-Semitism. I think that's correct.
They say it in the and again with the IHRA definition in particular. Before they go into those 11 examples, there's a sentence where they talk about how taking into account the overall context, right?
Yeah, but that would, I think, by definition, commit you to anyone who denies the right of Israel to exist is anti-Semitic. I think that's right.
The example listed is
you think denying
So, wait, what's the question?
Whether denial of Israel's right to quote unquote right to exist is anti-Semitism by definition, on that definition.
They say, I'll give you the exact
on the IHRA
definition. They say denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, for example, by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor.
Yeah. So on the IHRA, so when I look at so both the IHRA and Jerusalem Declaration have a definition, and then they have like a guideline section where they give examples.
Right.
So I take that to be as follows. You either have to do one of two things to onboard the definition. Number one, you either have to bake the examples into your definition. You don't have to do that, but that's one way to do it. Number two, you have to accept them as propositions. So and with the IHRA, you have to say like, if complete the proposition by saying is anti-Semitic, and you can do that by saying it may not be baked into my definition, but I accept the proposition as true, as just a synthetic fact, where in other words you commit yourself to the empty set thing, where it's okay, everyone who denies the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming the existence of the state of Israel as a racist endeavor is anti-Semitic. It may not be strictly analytically by virtue of the definition, but I am taking that on board as a true proposition, as a synthetic truth. I think that if you do it that way, you still can onboard the IHRA definition, because the examples are not strictly part of the definition. The examples are guidelines that basically say, to take this on board, like this is the things you need to accept. Does that make sense? The distinction between
that
the
makes
analytic
sense to me. Yeah, because so assuming that you accept the IHRA definition, you're basically saying it's either by definition true that denying or calling Zionism inherently racist or whatever that statement was is anti-Semitic by definition, or that it's true of every person who affirms it. In other words, right?
Right. Then you'd be in conformity with the guidelines. Then you'd be in conformity with the yeah.
And so I'll ask.
So that's what I take to be
LonerBox.
Like taking.
Do you agree with that? Do you agree that that like it's a synthetic truth, by which you mean like everyone who denies or says that Israel was a racist endeavor is anti-Semitic, and or do you define anti-Semitism in such a way as that being the case?
You're saying everyone who claims the existence of Israel as a state as a racist endeavor is anti-Semitic by the IHRA definition.
I think you'd have to accept either that or that it's anti-Semitic by definition. Avi, maybe you can.
No, I don't think you would have to, because again, like
not by definition. You don't have to accept it by definition, but you can say it's true of all those people. Because I don't unless you think. Let me just back up a second. Unless you think it's a heuristic, because I don't think they're offering it as just general heuristics. But I could be. Unless I'm mistaken. I don't think
so
the
either.
Jerusalem one does. But if you want to say it, if your view is that these are just heuristics, I mean, we can go with. I don't think that's true, but if they are just heuristics, then that would bring it more within the scope of compatibility with your notion. But it would also just deflate the strength of it, because
Yeah.
well, people who do deny the Jewish state and do call it a racist endeavor, then you're ceding ground that hey, that's not so anti-Semitic. It depends. Then you're giving the Pisco answer. You're saying, oh well, not necessarily.
Well, yeah, I am, but
That's
because
right.
it sounds like, again, because it sounds like they are as well, because in that paragraph before they list the 11 points, they say contemporary examples of anti-Semitism in public life, media, schools, workplace, could, taking into account the overall context. I think that
Okay. So then that
there.
sounds like the Jerusalem okay. So then there's different, because I don't think the Jerusalem definition offered as their guidelines is heuristic, but maybe the IHRA does. So okay. So then if those are heuristics, then what I imagine Pisco is going to say is, well, denying Jewish people the right to self-determination by claiming their existence as state of Israel's racist endeavor, that's just not necessarily anti-Semitic, if we're talking about definitions. Like, that's the sort of thing. And then appealing to the IHRA isn't going to negate that if your understanding of that part of the IHRA is a heuristic.
But I think, well, I don't know. I've read a few things from the authors of the IHRA, but I think I feel like if you ask them, let's say there's person A who says, I deny the existence of the state of the Jewish state because I think that I'm a multiculturalist melting pot guy, and I just think that historic Palestine would just be a better place if if Israelis and Palestinians shared it as a binational state. Then I don't think they would necessarily call that person anti-Semitic for believing that. But then person B comes along and says the existence of Israel is a racist endeavor. It's a colonial genocidal state that is by its very nature racist and genocidal and colonial, and it's really only there because like Herzl and a few other people had some idea to steal this land, and they don't really have any claim to they have no connection to Jerusalem or anything else. Then I think they're probably more likely to describe that person, taking into account the overall context, is
so I agree
anti-Semitic.
Yeah, they're more likely is the key there. So, but would they all? But Pisco's just going to say, well, are they always going to be? Because that's going to be the key. It's like, let's say someone says, the Jewish state is a racist endeavor, just like any ethno state is a racist endeavor.
Japan,
right? Say it like that.
Like
Japan's a racist endeavor. Like they're all of that.
Yeah.
And there are such people
So
like
then
this, by the way,
the-
and sincere. I believe that there are such people who are sincere about that. They think that all of these states are like some globalist. Even I'm not going to say that there are no such sincere people.
So then,
what if there's a journalist? What if there's a journalist who? What if there's a journalist who says that all ethno states are all ethnic states? Even India, Pakistan, whatever. But the only ethno state that they ever actually write any articles about or write any screeds about is the Jewish one.
Yeah, that gets your
anti-Semitism quite
yes,
a lot,
yes,
no?
yeah.
That's evident, but that's evidentiary,
evidence. Right?
Yes,
evidentiary. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I know, but I don't. Wait, is anyone here claiming that there's like a single sentence someone can say that makes them anti-Semitic, like unavoidably, other than "I hate the Jews"? Like
even that.
Even I hate the Jews wouldn't do it.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Because what if they're being mind controlled in World of Warcraft? What if a priest cast mind control? I hate the Jews.
Okay.
Right?
So the answer really is no. But no one here is claiming to have that definition, right? That we tend to analyze whether or not someone's an anti-Semite based on some kind of.
But that's what I mean, Loner. Is I don't think that this is an issue of Pisco has an out there definition. I think that you and I largely agree on at least how we apply.
I don't think your definition's out there. I think maybe in the last talk that we had, it sounded like there were some things that you said about bigotry in general, and some examples we used that I was taking issue with. Should we go with those and maybe?
Yeah,
see
I think so.
Because I think
yeah. So I think that would be fruitful because I believe, and maybe I'm wrong about this. And listen, I'm so open to this conversation. I'm taking a good faith, and I'm happy to give ground if I think I'm wrong. I feel like I treat racism the same way.
Yeah. Okay. Out of interest, when the IHRA does give like their little working definition, and it's like in a little box, like their dictionary style definition. Curious to see if you even disagree with it. It says anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and/or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities.
Yeah, I asked this question before. I asked this question before, and it's kind of like, what do you mean? Do I agree with the definition? Are you asking me whether I use it? And the answer to that is like, I don't use it because I think to me that a certain perception of Jews, like just taking that by itself, I think you need the guidelines to inform that a little bit, because otherwise it sounds super vague and doesn't track the way I think. So, for example, let me give you an example. Ben Shapiro says things like Jewish in name only, right? And he goes after Democratic Jews, and said like either they're not really Jewish or they're not like in touch with their Jewish identity. I'm sure, Avi, you've heard him say shit like this, and that's implying a certain perception of Jews. But I don't think people would call Ben Shapiro. Maybe you would. Maybe some lefties would, because they call Netanyahu anti-Semitic. Would you call Ben Shapiro anti-Semitic? It's a certain perception of Jews, right, that he's pushing for.
Which maybe expresses
technically,
hatred towards Jews.
Technically, if you want to get really,
you would be that.
About it. Like, I love Jews is also a certain perception of Jews, but no one. Yeah, this is so. I think what Pisco's just going to say is like, okay, well that needs to be a couple issues. Number one, he would want it to be informed more, and it's the examples that are doing the informing, not all of which he agrees. He agrees at least always. Little pet thing that is that I noticed that should be patched up. It's a circular. Because the word anti-Semitism appears in the actual definition, that actually makes it technically a circular definition. So which can be patched up. Like I'm not saying circular definition, and I went like. But
I just mean, if he asked me, do I prefer it? The answer is no for these reasons. Like it seems it doesn't seem to track common usage, even if it's adopted. By the way, even if it is the majority adopted definition by countries, right? I wouldn't even deny that. I just think like if you're asking me, does that track how people use the term? No, because if I were to, at least not the term as it is laid out there, and then the second sentence there, which includes anti-Semitism in the definition, that's why I don't prefer it. I'm happy to use it, but I'm happy to use any definition. I'm just going to be like, well, if that's all we mean, depending on what the examples inform the definition, it's going to change like the weight of this label.
Okay. Well, their inclusion are you sure that inclusion is used in a circular way? I thought they were saying that first of all, they're saying what anti-Semitism is, which this certain perception, which may be expressed as hatred. Then the time when they use the term is when they say rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed. Aren't they just saying rhetorical, physical manifestations of this certain perception, which may be expressed as hatred?
So if that is, so it depends on whether that's just the statement about the definition they just gave, or
part of the
part of the definition. If it is part of the definition, it's going to be circular, because what you can do is you can term substitute the entire definition into the word anti-Semitism there, and it's just going to regress on it. So, and it's not this is not a big deal. Like this can very easily be patched up. Like I can replace anti-Semitism, the word anti-Semitism,
hatred of Jews or dislike of Jews.
Yeah.
Like such expressions, even like such expressions would work.
Yeah.
Like, and that would patch the whole thing up. It's not. That's a moot point. It's a moot point that I raised just like because I'm from the philosophy land or whatever. Like, okay, but just to be clear, that's not a big deal. It could be patched up.
Okay.
But I think the bigger issue is, I'm sympathetic to this too. Like I would want that definition to be more informed. Like and they are informing it. You can inform it a number of ways. You can either like list out examples to ostensibly inform it, or you can have something in the definition that informs it itself, like say, hatred of Jews or
prejudice. Discrimination.
Prejudice or different treatment on the basis of which is unfair, like things like that. I actually would like to see more things like that in the definition, rather than just saying like it's what was the way they phrased it?
A certain perception.
A certain perception. I don't think certain perception does it justice.
Okay. And when they say, I guess another critique you can make of it is that they don't really ever explain how their examples 7 to 11, which all concern Israel, and how they actually come back to expressed as hatred towards Jews, right? Like they don't really.
Well, that's not in the definition there at LonerBox, right? Like it just does seem to be the case that there's like some.
I just
desire.
said that's a critique of it, by the way.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. I'm not sorry. My tone is giving off more negative than I intend. My bad. I honestly think that we agree more than we disagree on the definition thing, Loner. I really do think that. But I think that there's, on behalf of some people, they're trying to do the work of proving what most people would see as anti-Semitism.
That's fine.
My bad. Okay, we're reconnected.
While
Sorry,
he's doing
guys.
that,
Just refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm probably going to go into this whole thing about it's more like the practical use of the definition that I'm
So
taking
that's
issue with.
yeah.
Like,
So that's
yeah,
the key thing, and that's what I think the mismatch here is. Like I think the mismatch here is not about so much the definition as much as what people take from that and the lack of clarity on how that it plays in with the evidentiary standards and how one in practice would go about providing evidence and convincing someone that someone is within the scope of that definition. Because it sounds like to a lot of people hearing this, and not without complete unreasonableness. Like a lot of people get this impression, so it's not like everyone is just completely insane for thinking this. A lot of people are getting the impression that when people clarify it in these terms, no one can be an anti-Semite in practice. It's like you're basically just going to shrug your shoulders on anything and be like, yeah, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Like, okay, well, he's using this
I resent
slur
that a little
against
bit.
Jews, not necessarily.
I resent that a little bit because I feel like a lot of these conversations haven't moved off of the definition aspect. But I would just like instantly grant like Fuentes. I think TYT. I think
Yeah.
who was this? Mike from PA, right? He said Jewishness is a demonic ethnicity or something. Like I will instantly start rattling off examples both from the left and the right about anti-Semitism, and I've done that before. And so here's what I don't want. Here's what I want to clear up. This notion that Pisco has a proprietary definition, this notion that Pisco is making his definition in such a way such that he can never apply it, I don't think that that's the case. And I think right now we've established that in the general concepts, there is alignment between all of us, really, I think, and how we would think about it. I don't think that that's the big issue. And I think that people are drawing impressions from the definition talk to inform, I think, a badly formed view on like my evidentiary standard.
Right. Yeah, no, we agree on the definition issue. It's not proprietary. So moving to the disagreement, I think I'll just give like one broad proposition. You can see
just real quick, because I don't want Pisco to resent me for what I said.
Sorry, I just meant the idea. I don't resent you, the person.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just conveying what has been happening. And the other thing the other impression that they may have, by the way, is they may have the impression that someone like Pisco, even if you mentioned some individuals there, Pisco, but those are some really hardcore anti-Semites that you mentioned. Like someone might say, like, unless someone gets to that level because of some Pisco's definition, unless someone gets to the level of Nick Fuentes and like uses like the case slur or says like outright like I hate Jews, like maybe then Pisco will see it as evidence, but anything barring that, he's basically not. He's going to like.
I would like to talk a little bit about that. I know Loner wants to say something, but like I want to walk. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Loner.
Okay. This is a good ground. It's like, I think it's a good place to start because it's like right at the basics. I understand what. So if someone comes up with a definition and says, I think racism or anti-Semitism is like prejudice or hatred, like on the grounds or on the basis of them being Jewish or them being black or anything like that. I understand that. Okay. I don't actually think in practice that is the best description of how bigots operate or how bigotry works. I don't think most bigots hate X or Y group because they think that group, just because they are part of that group. Like I don't think that's the bottom of the pyramid, right? Like I think people are bigoted towards particular groups because of something they believe about that group.
Oh, so they have reasons, for example,
yeah, but I think that the reason is the basis, and then like the ethnicity or something that comes above that. And I think that shows itself in the way that like, and I think this is why, for example, you can get things like people who are anti-black in America, but they might actually have no issue whatsoever with middle-class Nigerian migrants, or they might vote for Obama, or they might like Oprah, but you can still call them quite easily an anti-black racist because they tend to, they're quicker to call a black person a thug if they commit a crime, or because they, they vote in ways that are like disproportionately punitive towards black people. Like these are the kind of things that you can go with. But I think the basis of bigotry is like, for black people or Muslims or for Jews, it's usually because there's some kind of like narrative structure about a group that is actually the basis of the bigotry. So with black people, it's narratives of propensity to commit crime and sexual violence and thievery and whatever else, or like If you go deeper, it's the low IQ shit and whatever else. And I think with Jews, one of the popular narratives or prejudice narratives against Jews is that they have more power and more control over the world than they actually do, and that there's conspiracism, and that there's the use of like techniques or like rituals that are kind of like some of which aren't even scientifically possible, like these kind of things. Like the conspiracism is and the power dynamic is a big thing about bigotry towards Jews. When Muslims is terrorism and all that kind of thing. I just wonder if you disagree with that understanding.
No, there's kind of two things I'm disentangling from that. Like one is that it's not pure hatred, right? It's not pure hatred uninformed by like explanations or rationales that the racist or the prejudiced person will give them, and I just view those as not incompatible, right? It is possible that you have an explanation for a prejudice, but you are still prejudiced. So if someone says, well, I don't like criminals and I think black people are criminals, then in that context, yeah, they have a reason for it, but why would that be like incompatible with them being prejudiced against black people? I think that it's totally consistent.
Yeah.
There's no problem with my definition or notion and with people having reasons for their prejudice or hatred.
Well, it's because when I was asking you certain questions, it felt like I can maybe play clips if you want, but it sounded like when you introduced like some other qualifier or some more predominant qualifier, then that suddenly exempted them from the original hatred. So, like for example, I think one of the questions I literally asked was like, logically, can you be bigoted against like Israeli Jews, but not anti-Semitic? Well, so because if it's because of the Israeli nationality, like those particular Jews, then it doesn't necessarily make it anti-Semitic.
So can we deal with that?
But then I thought like, sorry, what? Yeah.
So sorry if there's a lag. I'm sorry, LonerBox, please finish your sentence. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, because when you start to apply that, then I felt like we were suddenly entering a world where some people who were like lots of people who are bigoted or like Islamophobic or whatever else would be exempt from an accusation of bigotry for the same reason, because Islamophobes, like most of them that I know, or at least like, as public figures, don't actually have a very, very like equal hatred when it comes to Muslims. Like usually it's based on like a level of how much they practice their religion or how visible they are, or like especially even where they come from. British Islamophobes have everything to say about Pakistanis and North Africans, but they don't really care that much about Kuwaitis or Bosnians or Kosovars or Uyghurs. Drew Pavlo is a good example. He's an Islamophobe. He loves Uyghurs, and he would welcome more Uyghur refugees into Australia because they align with his politics. But I don't think that exempts him from being Islamophobic. But I think when I asked you that, I gave the example of Tommy Robinson or Farage, because these people have Muslims in their lives who they love, right? Like the chair of the Reform Party is a practicing Muslim, Zia Yusuf. But I think your explanation to that was that, well, this is tokenizing them, and they're lying about how much they like this person, or like they're using someone that they hate for the whole group. But I don't think that's true. I think they like these people. And,
So there might have been a mismatch in me understanding. So like, I, of course, think there's nothing incompatible with having a friend who's a given race or liking someone who's a given race and not also being prejudiced against that race. I don't think there's anything incompatible with being of the race that you're discriminatory against. Like someone can be both Jewish and anti-Semitic. Someone can be both black and racist against black people. And so I wasn't implying that. What I was saying is that when
the issue there, just to be clear,
this
is the subset question he's asking.
Yes. Yeah.
So, because I remember in that discussion there was a point
that,
where he asked you about the subset, and then it seemed like you didn't think that they could be racist against the subset.
So I want to clear up the Israeli Jews point. So the Israeli Jews point. So I will get to that. I just wanted to clear up this issue of like the Tommy Robinson example. And there, I would just say, yeah, there's nothing incompatible with him being friends with Muslims and also having a prejudice against Muslims, and I would be fine with that. And I just think that some of the self-serving rationales, when I say he's a liar, that's kind of what I was referring to. That maybe he'll say, "Oh, I have a Muslim friend," and we wouldn't say that that's dispositive, or we wouldn't believe that absolves him of anti-Muslim bigotry. That's what I meant there. Not that I think that just saying you have a black friend cures you of racism. Of course, I think that that's ridiculous. And so on that particular thing, I think there was a mismatch. I wasn't trying to imply that Tommy Robinson doesn't actually have friends who are Muslims. What I was saying is you don't have to credit that statement as saying and believe him with respect to cleansing himself of prejudice he might otherwise have. That's all I meant there. And I can pause right there, or we can go into the subset question.
Yeah, well, what if it's about like whole like national collectives of that group, and it's and it's particularly conditional on, because I think when we came to Jews and Zionism, it was because, well, Zionism is like an opinion, it's a political position. Well, when it comes to Islam, like there are lots of or different groups of Muslims, there are political attitudes that are implied by different groups as well. So let's say Tommy Robinson is actually at a point where he wants a Muslim ban, but he's going to exempt, like say Kuwait, because Kuwait is like a very pro-Western Muslim country. Does that exempt him from being bigoted against Muslims if in his mind it's like conditional on their opinions?
Yeah, so what you're basically saying is if he institutes a Muslim ban that discriminates on the basis of their religion, would that be, but gives a rationale that is, well, it's because they're incompatible, their belief system is incompatible with the West. Are you asking me whether or not I would think that that's bigoted against Muslims?
It makes exceptions for certain Western Muslims.
Yeah. So in that context, I think that, okay, I don't know, Avi, how would you go about answering this? I think that like in a situation in which there's enough circumstantial evidence of discriminatory intent, and where that's informing, like, think about the Trump Muslim ban, right? He said he wanted to ban all Muslims, right? But his actual order he didn't get every Muslim countries. He included like North Korea and I think a Latin American country involved there. But there's just additional circumstantial evidence that we think we would infer the discriminatory intent, notwithstanding the carve outs there. So I think that situation presents a case in which it's testing the evidentiary standard. And with Tommy Robinson, I would just say like there's enough here to infer the intent of the policy that he proposed. But if it were really the case, Loner, and this is the bullet I think that you have to bite, if it really were the case that you didn't know that this person was harboring these feelings, right? And there wasn't all this other circumstantial evidence. And if it really was
that you knew they weren't, that you knew they weren't harboring the feelings.
Correct. And it was an ideology test, and traditional Islam failed it or something, I think you'd have to grant that.
And it turns out that like nothing else did fail it. That's again so part of the evidentiary process is going to be there like, okay, well, what are all the other ideologies that fail?
Right.
Did he also ban those?
Correct. Yes.
And if he didn't ban those, that's
evidence.
Also further evidence.
Correct.
It's evidence.
Yeah,
yes.
Well, that's why I don't like. That's why I think whether or not he feels a particular hatred for that group, like in his conscious, like to me, that's the part that I don't even think I necessarily need to call out to identify the problem. Or like, so for example, if Tommy Robinson, let's say he even took survey data from every Muslim country and just found the ones that, well, if they've got more than this percentage of anti-Western attitudes, then they don't get the ban. But then but that's because I think bigotry expresses its way more than. To me, it's not a state of mind. To me, it's a behavior. And to me,
that's the definition talk again, I think.
Yeah, but
behavior without a state of mind could also be
yes, correct. Definition. And that's also in my definition as well. But like to the extent that's included in my definition, yeah.
Yeah, but I think
so for example, gerrymandering carve-outs.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Someone starts gerrymandering carve-out. So for example, if you saw someone saying, "Okay, I want a Muslim ban," and they say, "Okay, well that's interesting. Why are you banning Muslims?" Well, you see. If they just happen to have 12% of this attribute and 17% of that attribute and 20% of this attribute on ideological attributes, then they're incompatible with us. And then when you look into it, it's just like, oh, well, this is just gerrymandered attributes that happen to capture the maximum amount of Muslim ones, and the other ones. Like, that is strong evidence. Strong evidence.
Yes.
They are an Islamophobe.
Right.
Okay, even though by definition it is logically possible for them to do.
But I would say that, right? I would say that, and I, of course, I'm not someone, and people give this impression that I'm just going to look at the face of something, right? I think that Trump, his Muslim ban, should have been struck down as violating the First Amendment's religion clauses, okay? And that's not because the policy was facially biased. It wasn't facially discriminatory against Muslims. It has to do with the circumstantial evidence of what Trump wanted to do, his statements and the attitudes and conversations informing the policy. That's why I think it was incompatible with the religion clauses. And so I'm not someone who's just going to look at like, what's the official reason given?
You think it was evidence that Trump is an Islamophobe?
Yes, it is evidence that Trump, I think, is biased against Muslims. Yes, of course.
Meaningfully strong evidence.
Yes, correct. I think that's right. Now, if there was other facts and circumstances, right? That informed, and these are some of these extreme hypotheticals that someone might, clip me out of context for, but I didn't want to give them. Suppose that you just had, 99% of all Muslim individuals committing horrible acts of violence against individuals in these societies, and it really was informed by that rationale, this kind of like country protecting rationale. I think that would change our calculation about what we think is informing the policy, especially when it's not, facially discriminatory.
Right. So if someone said we're going to ban a subset of Muslims, and you're like, that sounds messed up. Like, what subset? Is like, ISIS.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
You'd be like, and Loner, I think that you would agree with that too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Before I forget where the fuck I was going to go. The issue I have there is that I think maybe there's the one part that doesn't really get factored in, or what I haven't seen from like the last conversation we had as well, was that I think another very strong indicator of bigotry, say when it comes to Tommy or people like even with Trump, it's not just like the you can still, to me, you can still assume that their state of mind is like, I don't want to be, or I don't feel any like particular way about this group. But for example, say Tommy he just happens to see, well, it just seems like all the terrorism, comes from the Islamic, or all the grooming and the criminality comes from the Islamic world, right? And then he might even produce like a study from a think tank that says, well, 80% of grooming gangs are Muslim, even though it's a shit think tank. Or he might, look at, he has a few crime accounts on Twitter that he follows, and every single video is a Muslim committing a crime. He could genuinely and sincerely believe all that, and just think, well, I like Muslims, but also there's a problem here. Like,
so can we deal with that in the context of American statistics on black crime? I would like to do.
Sure,
I think this is informative, right? It's like, you would not deny that it's an unmistakable fact that black people disproportionately commit more crime, and it's not racist to observe that. You would say, correct?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think what would be definitionally racist is if you were to think, well, the reason that black people commit more crime is because they have a genetic predisposition to do so. And so the reason informing why one has that attitude, black people commit more crime, which you just granted disproportionately, right, is a true opinion, right? So it's an opinion, LonerBox, yourself, you hold that opinion, but that doesn't make you a racist, because the bias has to do with both unfair prejudice, and I also think like what's motivating the either the practice or the belief in a given context. And you can, so when it comes to the context of like Islamic terrorism or something, or it's a little harder there, because there probably is a non-trivial nexus between certain ideologies and their tendencies to do things in the world. I don't think that you would deny it either, right? I certainly think that, for example, Christian ideology plays a role into how they enact their beliefs into the world. And so it's a little harder, I think, when it's like these ideological bases of belief, whether it's like, and that's why sometimes I cringe at some of these terms, where I think that like you should be highly critical of certain religious dogmas or beliefs. But in general, I think what is supporting your belief or action is going to do a lot of work for me, and we can get to that through circumstantial evidence. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess maybe we probably agree as well that with the likes of the Islamophobes, then one of the very good indicators of that, or a good piece of circumstantial evidence, would be like obsession and like double standards, right? Like, I think this would be something that is quite a good indicator in the sense that, okay.
Double standards would matter to me. Yeah.
I'm curious, because with the definition of racism, anti-Semitism, this position, you're familiar with like Alito's opinion on gerrymandering that
Correct.
came up.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
So there is no contradiction in my belief and Alito's opinion on gerrymandering. The law that we passed, the Voting Rights Act, was specifically done to be independent of intent, right? Just so the Voting Rights Act used to, just in terms of result, if it resulted, irrespective of intent, in whatever they categorized as disenfranchisement, or I forget that now as I'm sitting here, the Cali decision, the specific terminology here, a system that resulted in a given outcome, that violated the Voting Rights Act. And so what they were doing in Calais was making it an intent test. They were making it sort of, you have to show purposeful discrimination, and carving out the part of the law that said, we don't care about intent, we don't care about purpose. So I don't have an issue with describing, saying that's racist or not racist in the context of like, if it really was the case, right? If it really, really was the case that these individuals were motivated because of political reasons to do the gerrymanderings they do, and you knew that, right? You knew that the rationale was just political. I don't think that you would call that person racist in virtue of that. But the law itself, said, we don't care about your intent. It's about the result, and it's to make it easier for us to prove, right? It's as a prophylactic measure that we don't care about your intent.
Right.
So that's what you take issue with. And so people who've been saying Pisco agrees with Calais, they're literally 2 IQ. They're 2 IQ because they don't know anything about the Voting Rights Act. They don't know about Calais. They don't know my opinion, and they're just memeing and saying random shit.
So it sounds okay. I understand. So it sounds like you're saying, okay, the difference there is the law doesn't care about intent.
Correct. And they rewrote the law to make it purposivist.
But you also don't necessarily care about intent to call someone a racist. You agree that someone could be a racist even if they're not intending to be a racist.
That's right? Correct. Yeah. But
okay.
So if they drew lines based on race, right? If they literally drew lines and the factors they included was race
and didn't intend to do so,
didn't intend to do so. Correct. Yeah. So that would be the example of the discriminatory. But let's say they took an action and it was political, but it resulted in A, B, C, D. So
it's basically just like so it sounds like your interpretation of the law is the gerrymandering is just based on what is the best explanation of what accounts for these lines. It's not what the intent is. It's not okay. So it's what's the best explanation, and if the best explanation is race, then it could be struck down.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
okay. But then would you apply that? Would you apply that to calling someone a racist? Like, what if the best explanation is that they're doing different actions on race?
Yeah. So if it's the best explanation, right? And if there's, it's the most predictive, or it's the one that has the least issues, and you can do this with anti-Zionism as well. I want to have the discussion about like the degrees, whether I'd call someone an anti-Semite versus I would say that they're moderately anti-Semite, or like, so I want to sort of cabin that conversation for later. But yeah, I would have no problem if the best explanation for something is anti-Semitic discrimination or anti-Semitic belief or bias.
Do you have a view? So if that is the best explanation, then
I would have no problem. Some level.
Okay. Now question. Do you have a view on whether the gerrymandering is best explained by political reasons or racism?
Yeah. So I think do
you have a view?
So in the context of the Trump-related gerrymander with respect to Texas, let's say, I think that was what was probably motivating Texas. It might have been mixed motive, but what was motivating Texas, the gerrymander, was Trump's political outlook. Okay, no one doubts.
Okay. So you agree with the gerrymandering? So the gerrymandering there should stand.
No. Maybe you're misunderstanding. So they use race, however, in the gerrymander in Texas. People like Governor Abbott were saying, this is going to be so great. We're going to make all these Hispanic districts, right? We're doing this. Okay. They disclaimed the political rationale because they didn't want to be seen as, and so they said, we're doing this to have more diverse districts in Texas. And there it is, even though there's not that rationale of hatred towards a given group or prejudice towards a given group, they are using race.
The decision is based on race.
Correct.
It actually was explicitly used.
Yes. Okay. And they used racial
metrics. Are there
metrics.
any other examples where... Was that the only case that this ruling applied to, or was?
No, there were other situations in like Louisiana where they claim it's for purposes related to politics, right? And it's explained by politics. And but
right. Do you have a view on that?
So my view is that the VRA, for certain states that have historical patterns of discrimination, carves out, even in cases where you're not using race and where you're not having intentional discrimination, but it just results in breaking up coalitions of otherwise compact racial voting groups, right? There's the jingles factors that goes through it. As I sit here, I'm not recalling all the factors, but
so it's coextensive.
Correct.
But do you have a view on what best explains it? Do you think, because coextension could be like, okay, well, it's
at this point, I think the best explanation. Yeah. So right now, I think the best explanation is the primary motivation for Republicans is political. They want to support Trump, and so
in Louisiana, the gerrymandering should stand.
No. Because I think the Voting Rights Act law itself relates to the effect based on the previous case law, the effect on the group, irrespective of whether you
even if it's not the best explanation.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's different. So your view is it's the law is very deflated on this, where it's just an outcomes based sort of thing.
And think about the logic of it, right? The logic of it is we're coming out of civil rights era, and we want to make sure that the kind of shit that they were doing there never happens again. And so and over time the law got more narrow, and in times like there was a court decision that said no guys, this is just about purposeful, and Congress went back and rewrote the law to make it more open to these kinds of cases.
That is like a functional anti-Semitism.
Correct. Yes.
The question is, would you call it like a racist gerrymandering without the?
Do you agree with the functional anti-Semitism sort of thing that is?
I view that as I view that as tangential to the conversation here. If you're curious,
all right, sure, we can discuss that.
If you're curious, I think that at a certain point,
that someone might ask that as a consistency check.
No. At a certain point, I think it should fall off, right? And some might argue that like. There's an anti-subordination rationale inherent in our case law that like we should want to make sure that we're never in that situation of like discriminating against race again. So we should have these protections for a long time. But I do believe
the law should change.
Yeah, at a certain point, I think the law should change. That's always been my view. And by the way, it's the same thing, except for the diversity rationale on affirmative action. I think that affirmative action type policies are justified either in virtue of anti-subordination with specific distinct histories, like that's okay. But at a certain point that should fall off too, except for the diversity rationale.
So the law should change in a way that the gerrymandering would stand.
At a certain point, yes, I agree. I don't know if now is the right time for that, given where we are as a country, but I don't think that for the rest of time that those functional laws should stay in place. But I do think that's tangential to our discussion.
Okay, sure. Got it. Okay. Sorry for the
no worries. You're
that's
interested.
Okay, but
that's cool.
just to shorten that then, does that mean that the people who were you saying that the gerrymandering that was done that was mainly or like even exclusively to help Trump, but it happened to discriminate against black people, like is the argument that you could or you couldn't call that a racist gerrymander?
Yeah, so I think some of these cases, unfortunately, are a mixed motive. I do believe that. And so it really depends on the specific circumstances. In the case of the Texas one, I think that there was a racial element in favor of Hispanics, because there was this like movement in the 2024 election where Hispanics went and swung, especially in Texas, towards Trump. And so I do think that was on the mind of a lot of Texas people. Now, do I think that that's the primary rationale? No, I think that the primary rationale is still probably to help Trump, but they used race as part of the metric there to do the
but let's say the exclusive rationale was to help Trump. That's all they wanted to do. They didn't care about anything else.
Yeah, I don't think you would
had to step in a few black toes.
So I'll bite the bullet, and I'm going to ask you the same question. If all they were motivated with was politics, and if they didn't use race as a factor to consider when they're drawing the lines, I would not call that racist. Do you agree? Yes or no?
But you're saying they didn't use race as a factor, but obviously they realized that they had to gerrymander, like they had to specifically affect black communities to do this.
They knew it would be a result.
Just they didn't really care if they had to.
They knew it would be a result, but they didn't use race to draw the lines itself. They used some other metric. They used so they didn't include that. And so you can actually do this, right? You can have a race blind map drawer who like takes out race data when they're drawing their maps, and that is possible. And so assume that they did not use race in drawing the lines, and they were just motivated by political advantage. Would you call that racist?
Well, this is just for the outcome, so no, not necessarily. No, I'll use your language, not necessarily. But I would ask if they knew that they had to discriminate against black people to achieve this political outcome. And
but they're not discriminating.
Anyway, even though that's just no. But if they did know that they had to discriminate, I mean, discriminate in the sense that like that black voters had to like necessarily suffer for this to happen.
I just don't understand what you're saying. So you're saying,
that's the outcome.
What I'm, it's not even the outcome, but it's not even the outcome. But it's not even the outcome. To me, it's the behavior itself. So it's going back to the question of the same.
Yeah, but they're not drawing lines based on race in that example.
I know, but okay, I know in that example. That's why I'm talking about another. That's why I'm trying to give you a hypothetical example where they only care about helping Trump, but they know they have to do a racial targeting to achieve it.
But then they would be using race as a metric to draw the lines, right?
Okay, yeah, but that's why I would go back to asking.
Or they can not necessarily.
Who knows that he has to exclude.
So they can use
say,
like.
Okay, go on. Yeah. Fine.
Sorry. Yeah. I think I could give a hypothetical. So let's say they didn't use race, but they used like socioeconomic status, but they there's some reason, we might have some reason to suspect the reason they're doing that is a proxy for race, to try to like get
If
that
we think
under-
it's a proxy for race,
Yeah.
racist. If we think it's
Then
a
you would
proxy
say
for
yes.
political opinion,
But
then
if we're
no.
sure there's no proxies for race,
Correct.
okay, there's nothing about proxies for race happening there as the best explanation, or race itself.
And I want
then you
LonerBox
wouldn't
to bite
care.
that bullet.
Like,
I mean,
then you wouldn't care. You wouldn't say it's like race. You wouldn't care even if it like results in every single black
well,
person.
I would care for political.
in one box.
I could care
Right,
for other reasons.
right, but
yeah,
not with respect to the.
correct. Yeah, I would
even
care
if
for,
it results in every single black person on one end and
and to be totally comprehensive, I would.
Oh shit, you're muted.
You muted.
Okay, I would care for reasons related to VRA compliance. No.
Okay, now you just you just unmuted.
Okay. I would care for reasons related to VRA compliance about what I think the law actually says, and I want the American law to be followed. So that's reason number one. I would still care, and then reason number two, I care about Democrats winning. So those are two good reasons I think that I would have to still object to the gerrymander on VRA compliance grounds and on grounds related to Democrats winning elections. But I wouldn't call that, if I knew that, racist. And LonerBox, I don't think you would either, because I think it would commit you to weird shit.
I still don't actually know exactly what you're saying, so I'll just give a different example, and it'll probably imply the same thing. So we went back to the shopkeeper who believes sincerely that he has to exclude black people and put a "No Blacks Allowed" sign on his door so that he can get better wealthier white customers and more money. He has no opinions about race whatsoever. Do we call this racist? And I'm still saying, yeah. Because
so if you're actually discriminating on the basis of race,
behavior.
Yes, yeah. So my definition and yours too accounts for that. And people, by the way, this is another example of bad faith. If you go to the conduit conversation, initially I say no to that. I think about it a little bit, and then I say, let me fix that. I was wrong. Yes, I would. And then later, even still in the conversation, I say I was wrong about that, and I backed away from that. But people are clipping that one little bit. And where I was wrong, because I was only conceptualizing in terms of bias, because I'm just reacting, instantly correct myself and acting as though my definition wouldn't account for that. And I think it would. But that's not the question, LonerBox. You have to bite a bullet one of these days, all right? The question is, if a person has a policy, right, that results in more black people having negative effects to them, but there is no racial motivation, there's no bias, in other words, and there is no discriminatory action or policy or effect, would you call that racist?
Again, I think it depends. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not that's not a simple question, because if you're a shopkeeper who sincerely believes that you have to exclude black people by putting a sign up saying "No Blacks Allowed," you're spending 8 hours of your day in your workplace excluding black people from consuming and deliberately.
You're fighting the hypo,
LonerBox, against them. So that would be that you're being racist.
LonerBox, you're fighting the hypothetical.
More police. If you have to put more police into communities where there are more crime, and it just so happens that the black communities have a bit more crime, then does that make you racist for doing that? Then
LonerBox, you're fighting the hypothetical. I'm going to hold you to a hypothetical. I'm not saying that the sign says blacks need not apply, because you and I both agree that would be discriminatory action, independent of mindset, correct? So you understand when I'm asking this question, I'm not asking about a sign that says black need not apply. I'm asking about some other policy that has extreme negative effects on black people that isn't by itself discrimination, that isn't by itself motivated by bias. Would you call that racist?
I can use your not necessarily if you want me to, but then I just need more information about what this policy is or how they came to that conclusion.
I think I can give an example.
Go for it.
Good one.
Yeah.
Let's say instead of blacks need not apply, it said heavily melanated individuals need not apply. And we knew this person really just cared about melanin, like the molecular structure. Like it wasn't about like the color of the skin to them. It was like they really just cared about this molecule. Like they had an aversion to the molecule, and they didn't want. I think that you have molecule. To bite the bullet. They had a religious belief against the molecule. Yeah, so you would bite the bullet. And that would result in like the only black people who would be allowed in the store are people with vitiligo. Top to bottom vitiligo.
But the thing is, Avi, I think you would bite that bullet too, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So you wouldn't say that's
by definition.
You would say that. So even if it results, and that would result in
in 100%
essentially
denial.
Every single black person,
correct,
not being able to enter.
It's something else bad, right? It's like an arbitrary policy.
What do you think it wouldn't? So you would think that again with the Civil Rights Act and everything, like that wouldn't violate the laws? on the,
help me out there. The civil rights. So it
do
might
you think
violate
that
the
should
laws
be
for.
illegal? Like, do you think it should be illegal?
Yeah, I'm
like
not
if
sure.
Someone said no
That's
melanated.
Yeah,
No
so
melanated
I'm
people
fine with
aren't
certain.
allowed in the store.
So I'm fine with certain actions done to ameliorate harmful effects. That's not the issue, right? I could be consistently in favor of the Civil Rights Act.
Not in you would say you say
virtue of-
it should be illegal, but not in virtue of it being racist.
because the policy is arbitrary, or because the policies deny is having such a harmful outsized effect.
And to be clear, if you actually were in the real world, IRL, someone said no melanated,
you would
people
laugh
apply,
at them
you
and
would
be like,
say
yes,
that-
yes.
and you would say they're racist. You
Correct.
would say like evidentiary.
100%. And Avi, you agree with me on this. Wait, one of you
Yeah,
guys.
I understand what you're saying.
Wait, no. Do you agree?
I agree. No, I will
Yes.
say it. I will say.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. With all the clear caveats
that we've just laid out.
Very clear caveats, because I know how this is going to sound horrifying to normies. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. I get it.
Get LonerBox to bite one of these bullets. This is bullshit. This is bullshit.
I've already said not necessarily. Listen, Pisco, for the third time, I've already said you're not necessarily, right?
Wait, no. But it's gonna lead to weird results, right? It's gonna lead to you to be committed to insanely weird results, where I don't think that you're gonna be okay with them.
Wait, what's going to lead to weird results? If I say this person who puts the "No Blacks Allowed" sign on his door, he's definitely racist, even though
holy
I see his brain and I find out that he doesn't actually.
That's not the example. Wait, Avi, I mean, I'm not.
Wait, the example. Yeah, the example. He has an aversion. He has a genuine aversion to the melanin molecule, and you read his mind, and you really know that he has no problem with like the color black or anything or the race itself. He just has the problem. Like if African Americans didn't produce that amount of melanin, he would have no problem with them. Even if they were black for some other reason, he would have no problem with them. Like, it's just this molecular structure. He's able to perceive it somehow, and it causes just this horrible feeling for him, for whatever reason. And you knew that's all it was. What I would tell you, what I would say is, okay, this is in this logically possible world. Okay. However, just caveat.
Mm-hmm.
Caveat the hell out of this. Yes. However, in the real world, I am essentially always going to say someone like that is a racist motherfucker.
And I would too. And I would too.
I don't disagree with any of that. Like, if you're giving me this completely yeah, I don't disagree with that either. But
that means you don't have to. That means we're once again not unaligned, right? You and I both agree on that hypothetical. We agree on what have we disagreed on so far, LonerBox, in that hypothetical?
Not in the hypothetical. The things we seem to disagree with was that it seemed like last time you were quite firm on the idea, and maybe something's changed, but it seemed like you were quite firm on the idea that you have to. It's a state of mind, and without that state of mind,
I think you might have changed since then. Because
in the conduit conversation, the first conversation, he asked about the racist sign. I said no. Then I thought about it for 5 seconds, and I said actually yes. So that's
your
where
view changed.
My view, if I thought about it, yeah, I mean, yes, in the moment it changed. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure
in the moment
past,
you vary around the view.
Yeah,
I
had a brain fart, and then I committed to it in good faith.
Okay, that's fine.
But when I brought it to our conversation, LonerBox, I accounted for that too. I said so. If you can go back to the VOD, everyone can watch. I wasn't the person who said you need a state of mind, but I did say that that's a big feature of what people I think often talk about is state of mind, as opposed to innocent discrimination, or sorry, I should say discrimination without the racist motive. That's why I was saying there's a centrality of focus on intent and ideas, because that's what I think we most care about in these spaces, or that we're most talking about in these spaces.
Okay, I really felt like it took quite a while to get there when we were talking, but yeah, I understand.
But to be clear about the LonerBox, we don't disagree on the racist shop example, right? We don't disagree on that, correct?
Doesn't seem so, no.
We don't disagree on a racially motivated shopkeeper, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And we both bit the bullet on a melanin whatever example where you can really isolate it. Okay, so then we perfectly agree so far. I don't think that there's been any disagreement on the definition and on any of the applications of the extreme hypotheticals. No disagreement.
Should go to the subset analysis, the subset example.
Israeli Jews.
Conversation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that you did in the initial conversation. I did hear you going back and forth in that conversation about whether the subset precludes being racist.
Yeah. So let's talk about the bias against Israeli Jews specifically. I had a hard time conceptualizing as the first time I heard of it. Like, you're not anti-Semitic against prejudiced against all Jews. You're prejudiced against the subset of Israeli Jews. That's what was being raised, correct?
Yeah, for what it's worth, in the Arab world, that's just a very normal opinion or a normal phenomenon. But yeah, sorry.
The phenomenon of being
It's
prejudiced
normal to
against...
not really give a shit about American Jews, but to really, really hate Israeli Jews, and even just to call them the Jews. That's why when Arabs say the Jews, like sometimes they're talking about all Jews in like in a Quranic hatred or whatever, like with the axis of resistance. But sometimes they are just talking about Israelis, like quite often.
So I think that example is pushing on some of our just the same evidentiary concerns. If you really knew that someone was prejudiced only on Israeli Jews, then I think you would say that and nothing else. You would say they're not anti-Semitic with respect to Jews. They're anti-Semitic with respect to Israeli Jews, or they're discriminatory with respect to Israeli Jews. And I don't see...
Even if they weren't discriminatory against Israeli Arabs, it's just Israeli Jews.
I think that's the situation, right? Like it has to... That would be anti-Semitic with respect to a subgroup, which is to say the Jews living in Israel...
Okay, and when you would say that is
Yes,
okay, so you can be anti-Semitic subgroup.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
so it would be an anti-Semite of sorts.
Of
like you
sorts,
would still be
yeah.
anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
It would just be a different type of anti-Semite.
But then the question was asked.
What if they only hated the Israeli Jews?
Who are
What if
Zionists?
they only happened to hate most of them because they were Zionists, right? So they hate like 98% of Israeli Jews, but it's because they're Zionists. They like Kadash and they like Omer Bartov and they like Avi Shleiman. But they really hate Christian Zionists as well. Yeah.
Right. Then it's just a question of like what you believe their actual, where the prejudice or where the discrimination is being targeted towards. If someone gives you someone who is not prejudiced and not discriminatory against an Israeli Jew who is non-Zionist, I think the conclusion from that, and then you genuinely believe them, is that they're not anti-Semitic against Israeli Jews, right? If they're not exhibiting that prejudice or discrimination towards Israeli Jews who are non-Zionists, then it's not the mere fact of them being Israeli Jews. It would be that plus Zionism. But then if they start applying like the same lens towards Christian Zionists in Israel, let's say they don't apply it towards, it just feels like the Zionism starts doing all the work and it starts answering the question. I don't know about you, Avi, what you think of that.
Yeah. So it sounds like the answer to the subset question is they still may or may not be on definition, at least, they still may or may not be anti-Semitic. Just the mere fact that it's only toward a subset doesn't preclude anti-Semitism. And we just look at what's best explaining their views within their actions within subsets. So, for example, if it's hatred of Israeli Jews, okay, what hypothesis best explaining the hatred of Israeli Jews is go into evidence. Is it do they have the same hatred toward Arab Israelis? Turns out no. Do they have the same hatred toward Israeli Christians? Turns out no. It's just Israeli Jews. Then it doesn't seem like an ideology is really. Yeah. It seems
Correct.
like it's not Zionism doing work here. It seems like there is some racial or ethnic sort of or religious sort
Correct.
of work thing that's doing work here, and that is anti-Semitism.
Yes, it's a
and that is strong. Then that would be strong evidence that it is anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
However,
it's a specified.
If someone's just broadly say, okay, well, I hate Zionist Jews, and I also hate Zion to the same degree. I hate Jews of any other race to the same degree. Like there's nothing over and above. It's not like I hate every Zionist, but I really hate the Zionists when they're Jews. It's the same. I just hate Zionists, blacks, and same. Then it seems like the best explanation is the Zionism there.
Yeah. No.
So the answer is it depends.
Yeah, I think that's
you can be
correct. Now the difficult situations are like these hypotheticals where it's like, okay, would you call them anti-Semitic? Let's say that they love every other Jew in the world. They spend all of their time, 24 hours, doing charity for Jews across the world. They just really, really hate, and they really have a prejudice towards Israeli Jews. Or like, let's say something else weird. Where these hypotheticals are like, they only hate Jewish bankers. They don't hate bankers. They don't hate Jews who are non-bankers. They just hate Jewish bankers. Now, those scenarios, it's hard for me to envision. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. I can. Let's go through one of each time. So someone does a lot of stuff for the anti-Zionist Jews.
Yeah.
Like they love them, they hang out with them, they praise them. They may even say that I'm the real person fighting anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
They may get up in Oxford, like, or for some
Yeah, wearing a
example,
Mao
and say
suit.
that. Yeah, they may say that. But then they hate Israeli Jews, but they don't seem to hate Israeli Arabs to the same degree, and they hate Jewish Zionists, but they don't, and they may hate also Arab Zionists, but they don't seem to hate Arab Zionists to the same degree, and they don't seem to hate Zionists of the non-Jewish varieties. They don't use the same slurs to Zionists of the non-Jewish, non-white variety, perhaps. They don't use the same vitriol to the non-white, non-Jewish Zionist, perhaps. If the Zionist is black, if the Zionist is Arab, they still treat them differently. They may not like them, they may hate them, but they may not be as vitriolic toward them than they are toward
Then
Zionists
absolutely.
when they're Jews.
Yeah. So absolutely.
Then they are still anti-Semitic then.
So on that view, I obviously I think that there's we will get into the degrees conversation and the different like layers and whether that constitutes hatred, but I think that is a form of anti-Semitism prejudice, and it would explain also good relationships with non-Zionist Jews in America, all that other stuff. Yeah. And I'm totally open to that, 100%. But
second example, bankers.
Bankers, yeah, go.
Second example, bankers. So again, same analysis. Oh, you hate Jewish bankers. Okay. Well, what about when it's a non-Jewish banker? What about when it's a black banker? What about when it's a Arab banker? What about when it's a Palestinian banker? Again, if it's just a different view there, if it's the same hatred for every sort of banker, then it's what the best explanation seems to be
bankers.
Covering all of it.
Yep.
You hate bankers.
100%.
If it's just if it's just bankers and Jews, then the banker or the Jew is the effect modifier there, but that's the problem. It shouldn't be an effect modifier.
Correct. No, I totally agree with that 100%. And I think LonerBox, you do too. I think we're all aligned on the definitions. And I think the question, before we get into evidence stuff, I think the question is like on these different degrees. But I'm happy to like pause in the LonerBox if you have any questions.
Yeah, well, to bring the example that Avi had with the person who's bigoted against Israeli Jews, to bring a real world example of that, which happens all the time, is like this person hates Israeli Jews, but they like the ones who are anti-Zionist, but they don't really care for Israeli Arabs. They don't mind them. They do hate Israeli Christian Zionists, but they only happen to remind you of that when you call them anti-Semitic, right? Or like they just say, yeah, I also hate Christian Zionists in Israel, so I'm not anti-Semitic. And that's the only time they ever bring it up. Then the rest of the time, they're just always talking about Israeli Jews who are Zionists.
It's the also back pocket.
They're also back.
Yeah,
no,
because
listen, that's into the evidence shit. But no, that's absolutely something that I would consider. The degree to which one affirmatively raises something, the degree to which it's a also ran kind of deal. Like I'm sensitive to that stuff. I'm sensitive to a lot of these tropes and a lot of these this bullshit stuff. I call it out on my own streams and in my own debates when I feel like I'm talking to a groiper just based on how they talk or when they use terms like goy slop. And so I'm sensitive to that, and I'm also sensitive to the point you just raised, LonerBox. I just don't think that that's captured in our definition conversations. People want to claim that I'm like, now maybe my thresholds are different before I'm willing to call someone something like that, but that is evidence that I'm willing to consider, and I don't dismiss it out of hand, which I think has been like the caricature of my position, is that I dismiss these things out of hand and I don't consider them. I'm just, those hypotheticals were informative for the hypotheticals we've used are informative for the definition talk, and we haven't gotten to the evidence part, in my view. Can I do a little?
Avi, I was actually wondering, maybe Avi's got an opinion on this. What if you take that same person who's against Israeli Jewish Zionists? They also hate the Christian, the Christian Zionists in Israel, but they're a bit more ambivalent or a bit more on the fence about the Arabs who live in Israel, but they especially hate Arabs in Israel who are actually Zionist. Can you know that whole thing about like Sinwar, like he killed twice as many Palestinians as he killed Israelis, right? Yeah.
Like the traitor thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would again. So that question would depend. It depends on. It depends on. Okay, so for example, like this is actually something. Well, before we get into that, so you're talking about like the traitor sort of sort of view. Like, okay, well, they're a traitor, they're a collaborator. Yeah, so then it's just like what's doing the explanation toward. But just let me exert the hypothetical. They hate Israeli Jews. They hate Israeli Christians to the same degree as they hate Israeli Jews, and they hate Israeli Arabs who are Zionists way more. Okay, then it seems like that's all there is.
Even the same, yeah.
The same. Yeah. No, and that just so yeah. I mean, they could have. Then it depends. I mean, they could have multiple reasons for doing this. So someone can have a traitor sort of feel. It may not be because they're Arab and Zionist that they hate them more. That they'll call them collaborators. It could just be that they feel that they're betrayed because of their relation, like their.
But that relation is inherently ethnic, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like that seems like
it's
I would argue that even if they hate the traitors more, that could still actually even support the anti-Semitic view. It can still support because they hate the Arab-Israeli collaborators because they see them as like a group that should be like on side against them, which is the mostly Jewish group, right?
So my what I would want to know is, okay, so a couple things. Do they think so they don't think that the Arabs are the only person who can be traitors. It's just that they're traitors with respect to them, like their position on the family tree. Like it's not necessarily even that like I'm looking at all the ethnicities and I see like this is the ethnicity that's capable of being a traitor. It's
because
just incidental to where I am.
Because if that were the case, it would rely on a preconceived notion of what an Arab should do, right? And it would imply some sort of like preconceived notion that you're not really an Arab if you do X. But the thing is, that's going to bring in like Shapiro, and I want to see how you interact with that and like the not a real Jew that discourse that maybe Shapiro engages in. I don't think you would call that anti-Semitic.
Well, actually, wait, before you answer that, on the other side, you see it with settlers as well. I've heard from multiple settlers, actually, that they'll try to make this defense that actually the biggest enemy of settlers is not Palestinians, it's Israeli leftists. That they actually have a lot more vitriol and they talk a lot more about their hatred for Israeli leftists who want them to leave the West Bank than they actually do for, or even Western leftists even more. So, but then to me, that actually almost like furthers or is just part of their bigotry towards Palestinians.
Yeah, I think it's okay. So I think
in group to be with them against the other,
Yeah, I think it would depend on why they have this additional responsibility. And again, separate from evidence, like just the definition, if it's in virtue of just the mere fact that they're this ethnicity or this Jew, like just being this ethnicity conveys a responsibility. Just being Jewish conveys a responsibility to be Zionist. Just being Arab conveys a responsibility. Like it inherently comes with a responsibility to be anti-Zionist. Just like that, those sorts of that, yes, that is racist.
Wait, so then the question is, I think that you're committed to Ben Shapiro being anti-Semitic on that view.
Wait, but hold on. But however, if it's incidental to some other thing, if for example, if they say, okay, well, the biggest damage, if someone says, okay, well, the biggest damage Arabs do to the pro-Palestinian cause are the Zionist Arabs, that's the biggest damage. And it's not because there's anything inherent about being an Arab that conveys like this responsibility to be an anti-Zionist. It's just because they're so easily used as tokens or something, which is all true. They are easily used as tokens by the other side. They're not naturally any sort of person like that is used. If they're talking about that sort of thing, I don't think that would commit them.
Okay, so let me give you a quote. Let me give you a quote. This is a quote from Ben Shapiro. Asked about why Jews vote for Democrats. He says most Jews are not particularly Jewish. He says it doesn't mean you're going to shul every Shabbat. I'm talking about like in any significant sense of identity. Judaism is just a thing that a lot of and he goes on. I didn't capture the full quote, but essentially he's basically suggesting that these Jews, in virtue of how they vote, are somehow less than Jews, or that there's something that we can be gained from. So would you call that?
Yeah. So I would say that's so I'm going to do the same two things: definition and evidence.
Yep.
So definition, if what he's saying if what he's saying is they are somehow less Jew, they're not Jewish, or they're less Jewish in some false way, like not a trivially true way, we'll do semantic analysis. But if he's saying that, And if he's saying that there's like, yeah, there is an inherent responsibility they're failing at because they're Jews and they should be doing this because they're Jews and they're not, then yeah, that is definition on my notion of anti-Semitism. However, if he's saying, well, by Jew in name only, what I'm really saying is I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that there's inherent responsibility they're failing because they're Jewish. I'm saying most Jews are Jew in name only because they really there's a denotation connotation failure. When they say they're Jewish, that connotates that they care about the religion. That connotates that they care about the culture. That connotates all these things. And if you actually look at it, in reality, they really genuinely do not. Like the denotation is mismatching the connotation.
Okay, but
when you actually investigate it,
let me ask your gut, right? When you hear Shapiro like go off on some of these Jewish Democrats, doesn't it feel there's an extra like, I know that we don't have the evidence right now, and I don't have it feels like there's an extra because he's like, you're a traitor to the Jews and like you guys are doing the work. Don't you feel that?
So I do. Yes, the answer is yes. I do feel it, and I'll give you my. I hate to, so I'm willing to do this without looking at the evidence. I'll give you my gut without looking at the evidence. I suspect there's both things at play here. I suspect there's a more minor component of the genuinely anti-Semitic than the other. I think that Ben Shapiro genuinely is he's recognizing something that is true, by the way. Like it is true that there are people who are like basically Jewish in name only. That when you actually look like Jewish Voices for Peace, they really are Jewish. And actually, I actually say
in religious terms, but not in ethnic terms.
They're Jewish. No, even
in cultural.
We'll get to that. Yeah, even like
they're gonna talk about how they're fucking Lebanese, right? Like how their main office is in Lebanon.
They're Jewish in politics only, is the way I like to say it. But that is really true. Like when you look at the way they try to engage in Jewish culture, it's basically the way in which it would be like someone taking a feather. If I were to take a feather, put it in my hair, and be like, I'm Native American now. Like it's that sort of slop. Like it's the Hebrew words are written wrong. The cultural symbols are done wrong. The holidays, all of the aspects of the cultural holidays are done wrong. They don't know any of this. They don't know the culture. They don't know the religion. It's very, very clear that when you really do look at it to someone who does know it, that they are just putting random Jewish slop together, and it seems like they're just doing this for political reasons. Just like if I were to take a feather and put it in my hair and say, I'm Native American now. Land rights acknowledgements are bullshit. See, I look at you can't call me not a Native American. I'm doing the culture. Like every Native American would look at that and be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like no, that's not how we do the headdress. That's not how we do any of this. That's the way I see JVP. Mm-hmm. Like they have completely bastardized anyone who like has any knowledge of Jewish culture and religion. So there is a truth to what Ben Shapiro is saying. There are groups that really do this, and it's so obvious they're doing this for political reasons. Like there is a truth there. I also do think that at the same time, I also do suspect there is a little bit of flair on that. There is a little bit of oomph on that. And it raises my suspicion that there might be something more to that beyond groups like JVP. It might be he may have a little bit of a thing against Democrat Jews. And he might think that there is like a responsibility toward Democrats because they're Jews that they really should recognize and wake up and like their race is on the line here. There might be something. I have to look for it. I need to have evidence. But I need to stress there is a truth to this. There really are groups like that are Jewish in politics only.
And if you were convinced of that, you would be comfortable calling Ben Shapiro anti-Semitic in some sense, and maybe we'd have to clarify what sense that is.
We'd have to the degree, but if it turns out, if I look into that and be like, oh, actually, it's not just like the JVP stuff that's best explaining that, which is like just true stuff. It's like more than that. It's like your average Democrat is like has a responsibility. What best explains Ben Shapiro's actions and the way he talks is Jew qua Jew. Then of course, I would say like. I
think that's consistent. I think that's fair and consistent. Should we talk about degree or LonerBox? Sorry, I know that we're.
Pisco, would you feel the same way about because I would probably want to put like for Ben Shapiro from what I've seen of him, he does seem to actually be quite
anti-Semitic in that respect.
Actually, I don't mind saying that, but I do think it's worth delineating like because you can say the same about like so many big, like Tommy Robinson again. He spends more time fighting with like white people from Hope Not Hate and Antifa than he does with fucking Muslims, right? Like most of his fight videos are with white people. But I think there is something different about a hatred or a bigotry towards an outgroup and a disappointment with your in-group for not being on the same side against the outgroup. Like defining, like Tommy Robinson defining white people and how they stand in the war against Islam, or for someone like Ben Shapiro or the Settlers defining other Jews for how they stand in the Israeli cause against Palestinians and the Arab world. I think there's maybe a bit of a difference there, because I think like it just seems to be that the more bigoted you are, the more of a high standard you're going to hold
for your own group.
For your own group.
I agree with that, and I'm happy to say that.
That's a bigotry of closeness. Yeah, there is a rival
Correct.
hypothesis. That's the bigotry of closeness.
But if it was someone like Reza Guru, who does the whole professorial thing of like, well, you see, the American Jews are a different part of the Jewish story. They're the Jews that got away. The Israelis are the Jews who lived through history. You know, the Americans are the European Jews. They're the ones who were able to find a home before the end of World War II. The Israelis were not, and then that's why there's like that disconnect, and how like the kind of like almost like bitterness that he has about being judged by American Jews who kind of like didn't really face the same problem post-war. To me, that's not really a bigoted thing going on there. But yeah,
Listen,
with Ben Shapiro, it's a bit different.
I'm happy to give ground that these are like true conceptions that I would recognize of bigotry or prejudice or discrimination, and that's the same way in which I see like Fuentes. Fuentes has many kinds of prejudice, and one is, I think, against white people who are traitors, right? Like, and he would say that like if you're, he's very angry against like certain white people because they're not living up to the standard of whatever white nationalist grounding that he professes. And so I have no problem with that. It's just like it will lead to counterintuitive labels on people that I'm glad that we're all accepting it, but I think we have to specify the kind of bigotry and the degree of it to get like to be fully, I don't know, accurate about what we're saying. And maybe we can talk about that next. Cool.
If you guys don't have any further on that, we can talk about degrees, like the notion, the importance of targeting degrees correctly.
So I think that like everyone's a little bit racist, and I'm sure that there's even notions of implicit bias that, if properly evidenced, I would accept, or like unconscious bias or these kinds of things. But I am professing a certain hesitation with like the loading of just calling someone a racist or an anti-Semite. And the reason for that is, I think when you use those without any qualification, those terms, it implies the hatred version of the prejudice. That is to say, Hassan hates Jews, or Cenk hates Jews, or Nick, whenever you say that like kind of unalloyed term, the term in and of itself, I think it implies a set of things that like, fuck, I don't know if I want to commit myself to that version of it, where like you can see, for example, some of these people, it doesn't seem like they hate Jews. They might have this version. Like, it would seem weird for me to call Ben Shapiro an anti-Semite in any world, notwithstanding the fact that we've identified a way in which perhaps this, this bias of closeness or this prejudice of closeness that you've identified would definitionally make him anti-Semitic, at least in some respect. But I don't think in any world I would ever catch myself calling Ben Shapiro an anti-Semite. So what do we do, Avi?
Yeah. Before we go into that, would you have an issue with accusing? Because I know what you mean. Calling someone a racist or an anti or whatever is different from saying that they've like exhibited some behavior, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but I don't think we'd have any problem, or I don't have any problem of saying that Netanyahu was being kind of anti-Semitic when he decided to reinvent the fucking narrative in the Holocaust to make it look like it was Hashmi al-Husseinis idea, right? Like that's
notice the qualifier, by the way. Kind of. So that's part
he
of
was being anti. I can say he was being anti-Semitic as well.
Yeah. No. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. By the way, I'm not saying that qualifiers are even a bad thing. I think they're a good thing in this, because this is exactly what I think is good to capture degrees. I think you could always qualify. You can say, and I don't care how you qualify. I mean, well, I do care how you qualify, but there's plenty of ways of doing it. There's plenty of ways of separating Adolf Hitler from
Ben Shapiro.
No, I do, obviously, but there's ways of separating Adolf Hitler from even like Anna Kasparian.
Sure.
Like there's ways of separating Adolf Hitler from Nick Fuentes. Like, yeah. So if it's an important difference there, there's two goals. You want to not overshoot, but not undershoot either.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
It's
agree.
important to, you don't want to denigrate people, be more than what they're due. I don't want to give off the implication that Anna Kasparian is an anti-Semite in the same sort of way that Adolf Hitler was. I do, however, in no world, I don't want to give off the impression that I don't think Anna Kasparian is anti-Semitic. Like I do like Anna Kasparian is anti-Semite. I want to give off that impression, and even people who are not at the Anna Kasparian level, I want to say. So you could say, okay, is this person anti-Semite, anti-Semitic? I'd say they're not. I could say they're meaningfully. I don't not at this level, but they're meaningfully. They actually are meaningfully beyond everyone's a little bit racist, anti-Semitic. They are something like, I would say something like that. And this is important because imagine if you don't do that. Imagine if you if you always have this threshold where they have to be at the Anna Kasparian level, the Nick Fuentes level. If they have to be at that level, that especially with like especially now that we've done all the definition stuff with the high evidentiary standard, this is like, you could imagine how anti-Semitism is going to run rampant. There's going to be meaningful levels of anti-Semitism
without any
any check.
Any
check. It's going to be all like, it's just going to go, a whole bunch of shit is going to be unchecked.
No, I totally agree with that, and I think that's fine. So would you take issue with someone saying like this? Listen, I don't think Anna Kasparian hates Jews. Let's be honest about that. But I do think that she has exhibits meaningful levels of anti-Semitic behavior, and I think that there's a bias there. If I said something like that, what would you take issue with that?
No, I think that's fair. I think Anna Kasparian goes a little bit. So then it's just like, I might dial that up just a little notch. But broadly I agree with the strategy.
Okay.
I agree with the strategy is like, okay, just try to target the level. Like, I think Anna Kasparian, I would say, is meaningfully anti-Semitic. Like, she's meaningfully anti-Semitic. I don't think she consciously hates Jews. I don't think it's like a conscious thing. But I also think most meaningful forms of anti-Semitism also aren't consciously hating Jews. Like, yeah. So I think it's far. I think, I want to be clear, I think it's far and above and beyond this level of, oh, we're all a little bit racist, aren't we all?
That's so funny. It reminds me of the joke that LonerBox told at the start with anti-Semitic more than is absolutely necessary, or hating Jews more than is absolutely necessary.
Anna Kasparian is anti-Semitic. She doesn't hate Jews, but she is anti-Semitic to a degree that is highly abnormal. Like, that is highly abnormal. Yeah. Not even to say that's defined based on normality, because everyone could be anti-Semitic. The Overton window could shift, but it's highly abnormal with respect to what should be.
You would
happening.
Expect in a non-anti-Semitic, everyone's anti-Semitic.
In a little bit anti-Semitic context. Yes.
And to be clear, I agree with that. I heard her say on Piers Morgan something about someone's Jewish identity causing them to react a given way. The dancing Israeli memes, for the same reasons of Holocaust denialism, that to me is strong evidence. And so just so people understand where I'm coming from, I'm willing to absolutely grant that. And I also agree that our epistemic or our evidentiary bar shouldn't be insanely high. And we might have differences in it, but I agree with the basic premise that you just laid out there. And I want to let LonerBox talk, but before we get into the specific evidence that we should bring to bear, I think we agreed on everything so far. I don't think that there's been we've worked out, I think, every disagreement so far, and I want to make sure that's right from Avi's perspective and from LonerBox's perspective. That so far we have all agreed. We worked some things out, but there is no disagreement yet. Correct?
No major. We might have some quibbles. We might have some quibbles on degrees and stuff. Depending on where the conversation goes, and we could tease that up. But
based. All right. Sick.
As long as we're really clear about the whole we're not just trying. Yeah, I mean it's the degree thing in the evidentiary thresholds. I want to be very clear. You would say, to be clear, the dancing Israeli memes, the whole thing about definitionally, it's not necessarily anti-Semitic.
Yeah, no.
That's not factoring. No, that's no. That's gone out. It's not definition anymore.
Correct.
It's not definition time. It's evidentiary standard.
Yeah, dancing.
That's strong evidence. She's fucking anti-Semitic.
Yes, correct. And just put extra emphasis on it. I put even a higher burden on political commentators who are well read. Okay, that implies that you've had time to look into this shit. So yes, that's all gone now. So now that we're actually applying it, there you go, right? But the problem is, so many of the people who are calling in didn't even clear the starting gate, and that's where these false smears have been allowed to persist about me that are motivated by lies of people who should know better. And here we are at the actual application stage, and what do you know? Instant grant. Of course I believe that. In fact, I've called it out before multiple times. I have a track record of doing so. Say less about Myron Gaines. You think I would ever sweep for the anti-Semitism of someone like Myron Gaines? Would I ever be like, well, technically you could? No, come on. I know that Myron Gaines is a more obvious example.
Yeah,
but
you want to do.
Yeah, but the
Anna Kasparian
on
the left.
Yeah, sure.
Anna Kasparian's a better example.
I feel like I'm fucking. Is it James Franco with the fucking at the gallows with the noose being like, first time you've been accused of being racist or supporting dehumanizing stuff on the internet?
No, I hear you.
Once in Peter's chat, if you think I support Palestinians getting shot in the head.
And by the way, folks, I like LonerBox a lot, and so please be fair with him and Avi as well. I'm sure we disagree on a lot of other stuff, but I think that they're both coming to this conversation with good faith, and I appreciate the convo. But now we can actually apply.
Are we getting smeared already in your chat?
No, I haven't seen a ton of it. But yeah.
Oh, just a little.
But I also haven't looked a shit ton. Just to.
Right. That's fine.
Avi, what do you because it seems with Anna Kasparian, like we're kind of like, and it seems that Avi and I probably agree on this idea that most seeing like in this space, especially from the left wing, is coming from people who don't seem to consciously hate Jews, right?
Yeah, I don't think that progressive anti-Semitism or like left-wing anti-Semitism, however you want to catch it, is usually overt, conscious Jew hatred. I don't think that that's how it usually manifests. I think but
they have a political belief system. It seems to be a political belief system that happens to, on so many different occasions, point towards and manifest itself as hateful or discriminatory or like a hostile behavior towards Jews, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that ends up, and in many cases, that ends up resulting in them taking actions. They may or may not be aware of it, but they may taking actions that saying things the way they treat that are not best explained by things in full by things that aren't Jews qua Jew. Like it results in that. You see that. And there's just like we just agreed on an example, like Anna Kasparian. Like she's anti-Zionist, but that doesn't explain all of her behavior.
Correct.
And anti-Zionism does not explain all of it. There's Jew qua Jew as the best candidate explanation for some of that behavior.
Yes, I agree. And that's not to say, by the way, I had a really great interaction with her at Word War Debate. That's not to say, and I obviously I hope that people are able to clear these prejudices from who they are or from what they believe in shit. But yeah, that is my position. And the fact that we had a good interaction on Word War Debate isn't precluding me from saying what I think. And so, yeah, it's not, to me, I want to be clear about that these conclusions I'm reaching in good faith, notwithstanding the fact that, it might upset some people.
I'm gonna put you to the test when I present the evidence for Hassan Piker's anti-Semitism.
Sure.
And we're gonna see.
But the thing is,
I'm gonna do it. We're gonna see where your threshold is and if it's reasonable.
Yeah, and Avi, just to be clear, why would I have you on here if I was scared to address it?
Mm-hmm. Damn. Yeah, because in the last conversation I had with you, Pisco, I was kind of juggling with this notion, which I know is never going to happen, but was this idea of thinking that anti-Zionism can be kind of treated in the same way as being against Islam or being against Christianity, in the sense that you can really dislike this belief system and have lots of criticisms of everything else without being a bigot. But it can also eventually reach a level of extremity that it expresses itself as a bigotry, in the sense that anti-Zionism, because it's so different to or because it's expressed so differently to how we typically understand anti-Semitism, that it should just occupy its own space of bigotry, where you can be anti-Islam, you can be anti-Zionist without being bigoted, but there's a big prevalence of people who do hold this foundational belief, anti-Zionism, anti-Islam, but they are actually bigoted, and it reaches an extreme. The problem, however, is that you're never going to get this understood in the English-speaking world. The English-speaking world's never going to agree that, or to come to some kind of collective understanding of how anti-Zionism can be used in the same way that Islam as a political belief system that manifests itself as hatred towards a minority group, which is why although I don't think it's perfect, I think this is why like the levels of extreme anti-Zionism that do manifest as hatred like can easily become anti-Semitic, which is
Of course they can. Yeah.
9/11 dancing Israelis. Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
okay. So we
of
seem
course
to
they
all
can.
agree with
Yeah,
that
yeah.
as well.
In
Okay.
fact, I think that almost every anti-Semite is probably an anti-Zionist. I think that there's like basically
Apart
a
from Ben
circular.
Shapiro.
Apart from exactly, except for the people of that type of.
Well, actually, there are anti-Semites who are Zionists. They think all Jews
should
should
be
get out of
sent.
America and go to
Okay,
Israel, and
it's
they're-
highly. I should say it's highly
Yeah.
correlative. I would say. But
Okay.
no, I'm happy to grant that like, it's something of interest, something of note. I'm not like, the same way, by the way, that like there's like very strong associations between a lot of these right-wing nationalists' political sentiments and anti-minority bigotry or that's a strong correlation. Now maybe there's something else that you're trying to imply there that I'm not understanding, LonerBox Robbie, but like yeah, just like I agree that there's a correlation there, and depending on how the anti-Zionism or the the right-wing nationalism manifests, I might think about a statement differently and think that the best explanation is the prejudice.
Yeah, because because I have a proposal that can maybe like get around that, maybe get some disagreement. I might need to ramble for a bit, but there's this problem that a lot of critics have with the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, where they see these words in the box that talk about hatred towards Jews. Okay. And then I think another scholar talks about like, yeah, hatred towards Jews as Jews. But then they list a bunch of examples of it. The last four of which, at least, are nothing really to do with Jews. It's about Israel. And people they say that like the IHRA definition doesn't really ever explain how the extreme anti-Israel stuff gets put into the definition of anti-Semitism. I think that's a good critique. And I think the way that it's kind of solved is this paper that I read talking about the distinction between like social or interpersonal anti-Semitism or versus political anti-Semitism. So the 20th century political anti-Semitism, mostly from like the Nazis and in Europe, was this idea that Jews were a certain subset of Jews, like a bunch of them were controlling the media and they were controlling international institutions and they were stabbing Germany in the back in World War I, and they're the reason Germany loses wars and they're the reason Germany's in World War II. They're behind communism, everything else. And because they are so secretive and because they're so malicious and because they're such a closed off community, there's not really any way to defend yourself against this problem unless you eradicate the Jews from Europe. That's like that's the Hitler's prophecy in a nutshell. And I think it also explains why the drive to exterminate all of the Jews was specifically Europe. When they were in North Africa, they didn't rush to do the same thing there. They discriminated them, but they didn't put death camps in Morocco and North Africa, as far as I can tell. They weren't there for that long. Maybe they would have, but it was mainly European Jews, and that's where the conspiracy was coming from, that's where the protocols come from, etc. So there's this political narrative about a group of Jews in particular, like the conspirators, and it manifests itself obviously as the unprecedented level of hatred towards Jews. The way that people solve this issue for the IHRA definition and Zionism is that these examples that they give, if you believe that Israel as a Jewish state is on par with Nazi Germany and apartheid South Africa, i.e. two states that have since been abolished, then people who support that state's existence are also on par with being a Nazi, which would entail the vast majority of Jews in the world, and that many of them actually hold it quite essential to their Jewishness. It's like, how do you advance that political narrative without your behavior manifesting as hatred towards Jews as Jews?
How do you advance that narrative without I guess I'm not following. Without
the narrative that Israel controls the world, Israel controls America. Israel's behavior is, if you only listen to the ex-political commentator, you would think that Israel is literally committing more crimes than any other country in the world, or all of them combined even. That it's on par with Nazi Germany. Anyone who has any sympathy for it is also tantamount to be like supporting Nazis, so the logical conclusion of all of those premises would be that the majority of Jews in the world are Nazis and should be treated as such. And how would you advance that political narrative without your behavior and without spreading behavior that expresses itself as hatred towards Jews?
I mean,
it's going to be very hard to do that, and rightfully so. It should be hard to do that. Like, because again, this is going back to the definition thing. Like, yeah, it is definitionally possible to have those views and not be an anti-Semite. But again, most rational people should take that worldview and hear that and be like, yeah, this is good evidence they're anti-Semitic.
Yeah, if you think that most Jews are Nazis and that the Jews control, that pro-Israel people control the world and
and everything like that.
Yeah, that would be highly informative. Yeah, of the definition.
And it's also to be clear, possible in the sense of actually substantially possible, highly possible, to hold all of that entire political narrative that I just said. Because I just gave 5 or 6 sentences there about what these people believe. It's possible to believe all those things without thinking you have any issue with Jews.
Okay, well, let me tell you.
No, it's possible.
But can I tell a different story? All right, let's say this story.
But it's also actually very possible. It's actually 20, 30% or 50. That could be the case more than half of the time, right? Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but yeah, when I see if I don't know I don't know I don't know the percentages, but when I hear that, when I hear
say it's possible, Avi, I mean, these people are everywhere. I mean, people who think that Israel is like the Nazis, that everyone is towards these people are everywhere. Yeah, who believe this?
Yeah, and I think and I think it's good evidence they're anti. Yeah, and I think it's good evidence they're anti-Semitic. Again, it doesn't have to be conscious hatred. It doesn't have to be conscious hatred for them to be anti-Semitic. It could just be that because a lot of people with those views are going to end up treating Jews who are Zionists different from non-Zionist Jews. They may treat Israeli Jews different from Israeli Arabs. That's all. There's going to be a high degree of overlap with that, right? Okay. Because when I hear people who say stuff like that, it very rarely just ends there. When you look at the way they operate, there's different standards that they have. Because the person that you Hassan Piker, who I'm going to talk about, he's an example that fits the bill. But I with the caveat we haven't discussed about the conscious hatred, but he's an example that fits that bill. And not surprisingly, when I look at his behavior, it's not explained. It is not explained just by
anti-Zionism,
Zionism or stuff, but by anti-Zionism. It is there's Jew quad Jew there, and it doesn't have to be conscious.
Yeah,
it doesn't. Yeah,
I never said that it needs to be post my correction after the conduit, 5 seconds after conduit laid out that example. I never said it requires conscious bias specifically. Yeah, okay. But let me can I tell a different story of that, a similar set of facts. I don't know if similar, but you guys tell me what your reaction to it. So someone thinks that Benjamin Netanyahu is the modern day Hitler. Someone who thinks that Israel has a great deal of significant influence on American foreign policy. Someone who thinks that support for Israel is an anathema because it's support for genocide. Just on those 3 beliefs by themselves, would you say that those are would that be evidence in your mind of anti-Semitism? Except for maybe there's a correlation thing there.
It's a weaker form of evidence. But the answer is yes. The answer is that all you just gave me that
for sure. Right?
Yeah. So is it in the same?
Giving me just those things.
But it's the same way as saying
the same category is
anti-immigration. But what about if I give you this person?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You're treating that
even a bit weaker. But it's that's weaker
for predictive power
because it's weaker predictive power. But yes, all else equal. If someone says I want to just shut down the borders, my credence that person is a racist is going to go up.
Okay.
I'm not gonna.
I buy that. I agree. And by the way, I agree. If we're, but you would never say if you heard that, right? If someone said, "I want to close the border. I think we need to deport all the illegal immigrants," you wouldn't feel comfortable going with that alone, being like, "You're a racist."
No, not that alone. I'm going to say you're a racist. No, no. But my credence goes up.
Up. Yeah, I agree.
And it's going to be cumulative. And it's going to be cumulative with other things that that I see them do or not do.
Agreed. Yeah, 100%. I think we're all aligned, folks. I don't know. So far, but all this prep work.
Again, we'll.
So did you have any? Pisco, did you have any comments or criticisms or anything about that? What I said about political anti-Semitism versus mental or social, or interpersonal?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure. I think that the set of facts, the distinct history that you've laid out, would inform how I interpret different statements. I suppose if that's what you're asking, and I think that would be true of any I'm sure different prejudices have different distinct histories that would inform how I interpret someone saying quote, I'm not saying this, quote, Jewish rat, I would think about that differently than someone, you know, perhaps calling another group a rat, right? Or another, like, you know, I don't know, because there's such a connotation there. And similar in terms of like the power dynamics or, you know, the specific history laid out in European Jewry or whatever, like all of that to me makes sense to factor into the analysis. I don't know if it changes any of the groundwork we've done, but I don't know. Does that sound unreasonable?
Yeah. What do you, I'll maybe ask one more thing and we can
go
go
for
to Hassan Abi. Actually, I have two more things. Well, okay. Do you, are you familiar with the 3Ds test?
No.
Okay. It's this guy who wanted to kind of give like a framework for how you separate like when anti-Zionism becomes anti-Semitism. And the kind of test he comes up with is this like 3Ds. And it's like, are they exhibiting like a high enough level of behavior when it comes to the following? Well, one would be demonization. Like, are they treating the state of Israel or Israel as like at its very core completely and absolutely evil? Like it can't ever exist in a non-evil way. It just like it has to go, kind of thing. And also like the constant comparison or the obsessive comparison with Nazi Germany, or with states like South Africa that have been previously abolished. Like and when it reaches that particular threshold. The second would be double standards, and the third would be delegitimization. Which again comes into the demonization.
Not on Sharansky. Yeah. Not on Sharansky.
Yeah.
3Ds.
What do you think about that as a kind of test for
It's things that
seeing when a level as anti-Zionism has become anti-Semitism?
Yeah, it's an evidentiary. This is an evidentiary heuristic, by the way.
Yeah. No, I would agree that it's a heuristic. Yeah, 100%. But I wouldn't be. But like I said, like if the best explanation is, oh, this person is just like anti-Western pilled and like thinks that all of these states are genocidal, and they do apply that consistently, and it is something where they just like are super anti-ethnos. Like I'm going to consider the totality of circumstances, but yes, I mean double standards are good evidence. I believe that Avi's going to present a bunch of double standards evidence in a moment.
Oh yeah, I've got a few of my own. Yeah, and I guess the last thing, I guess, it doesn't seem like we have any disagreement over calling like particular behaviors anti-Semitic as well. So like propelling narrative. Like so, like would you say? You can say
Zionist occupied government is strong evidence to me. Is strong evidence to me that someone is anti-Semitic because of its particular usage, and I think that that's a fair read. If you can believe, though, like to me, it's just the term usage there. You can believe that Israel has a great deal of influence over American policy. I think that that's like an accurate statement in this administration, and I think that and I don't know that that's like. In fact, I would affirm it.
Not quite Zog. Yeah, you're not Zogging when you say they have influence.
I think it's exaggerated. It has influence, but I think the degree of influence is highly exaggerated.
Yeah, but like that could be your position, right? And someone who thinks it's less exaggerated.
Yeah, and someone could think it's more exaggerated. Yeah, right. Sure, someone could think it's more exaggerated. But again, when someone does have an exaggerated view, that's is evidence.
Increase of credence.
That's going to increase my credence that they're also anti-Semitic.
But that's just in terms of like the propensity stuff there.
And
but
it should.
Yeah. In the same way that's like someone supporting Trump, and you will grant this, you would say is more likely to be racist.
Yeah, someone supporting. Yeah.
100%. Okay.
Yep.
So, yeah, that all flies with me. I think that's cool.
Although the degree is probably a bit more when someone is exaggerating Israel than just merely supporting Trump, to be clear.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that's necessarily the same degree.
Is that gut? It's a little gut intuition. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I quick fire a few of these ones? Other examples. Go back to Brooklyn. Go back to Poland. Anti-Semitic.
If you're telling who to go back to Brooklyn,
Israelis
to go back to Brooklyn. Yeah. So my intuition is that you're basically saying they should go back to where other Jews are or something, and so I would take that as to be an anti-Semitic remark in most cases. Avi, do you agree?
Holocaust and
yes. That I would take that to be meaningful evidence that someone is anti-Semitic.
Okay. Holocaust inversion.
Meaning that you're saying that that Israel is doing something akin to the Holocaust?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that, like, in the same way that Avi described raising credence just in terms of probabilities, I would say it raises credence, but I don't think the comparison in calling Israel Nazi-like or doing a Nazi-like thing, even if it's ill-informed, even if it's wrong, that strikes me the same way as go back to Brooklyn. I don't know what
That
explains
would be
that,
a weaker credence.
yeah.
It would be a weaker
one.
update
Okay.
than go back to Brooklyn, but
Yeah.
it would be an update.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we already covered whether or not like a Muslim ban.
To be clear, the Brooklyn one
Gulf
for you,
would-
Pisco, that's a
It's
meaningful
very strong.
update.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's very
Yes,
strong.
that's a
okay.
meaningful. Okay.
Yeah. That's
Cool.
very strong. And it should be. And I think people should be aware of that shit. I mean, that's. And I would never fucking, like, I just can't imagine myself telling Israel go back to fucking Brooklyn. It just seems very anti-Semitic. So I have no problem saying that. I have some questions for you too, LonerBox, but you can continue.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think we already covered whether a Muslim ban half of the Gulf could still be Islamophobic. That's fine. We covered 9/11 and dancing Israelis.
Yep, that's also very strong evidence for me. Something that I like that would highly factor in for similar reasons, by the way, to the to Holocaust denialism. And so yeah, that's high credence for me.
Okay. I wanted to show a Finkelstein clip from 2015.
Wait,
but
I have
we
a question,
probably
Avi. Do you think Finkelstein is anti-Semitic? Meaningfully?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I thought you
In
were saying that,
2015, in 2015, he was talking about how spikes in anti-Semitism occur in the West when Israel's fighting with Palestinians. So defensive shield, cast lead. And he'd said, literal quote word for word, that's not anti-Semitism in any meaningful sense. That's a state that calls itself Jewish, carrying on in a horrifying way, and so people react to it against Jews.
Wait, say that one more
That's
time.
the anti-Semitic statement. So he said that when anti-Semitism rises at the same time that Israel is increasing their fighting with Palestinians, he said that's not anti-Semitism in any meaningful sense. That is a state that calls itself Jewish, carrying on in a horrifying way, and so people react to it against Jews.
I'm not sure what to make of that statement. I mean, like, are you saying that he's suggesting that the response of anti-Semitism is like rational? Is that the kind of
It sounds like he's saying it's not. So when Jews and
or expected,
it sounds like he's saying when Jews in Europe get attacked, when Israel's fighting with Palestinians, it sounds like he's saying that's not actually anti-Semitism. People reacting to Jews in a because they've seen Israel conducting itself in a horrifying way. To me, that just, because I've heard people do this as well, but to me, that just sounds like he's covering for anti-Semites in a way that you would never cover for any other bigot.
It's like, you know, when
that's not
like
Islamophobia when someone attacks a Muslim because ISIS did something in France or did something.
Yeah, so like I see this. I know what you're talking. I see this a lot too. Like there was that there was like an like there was an attack on Jews in America, and then it gets reported, and then someone will comment on Twitter, "Oh my God, how horrible is this? It's so bad that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza and causing anti-Semitic attacks in the United States like this. We really need to do something." Like that. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about, Loner?
Yeah.
So in other words, charting an increase in anti-Semitism towards Israel's own actions.
Yeah,
what if that's true though? Like,
I'm saying it's not even anti-Semitism in a meaningful sense. That's something different.
Then I think denying anti-Semitism when it's clearly anti-Semitism,
even if they're not denying it in a meaningful sense, I think even if this is true to some degree, because it's not because. Even if it's true to some degree, even if that is true, which by the way, we can get into that. But even if that's true, because even if that's true, we can get into the effect size of that, and if that's really accounting for everything. But even if that is true, so I do think that just that in and of itself is going to still be evidence of anti-Semitism and meaningful evidence of anti-Semitism. Particularly, unless I saw that they did this ridiculous, that they did this sort of, let me just reframe all the condemnation and blame and sympathy into anger at Israel. If I saw that, that's attack, let me reframe the attacks on Jewish people, the anti-Semitic attacks on Jewish people into anger against Israel at every step of the way I can get.
Raises credence for you.
Unless I saw them do it, absolutely raises credence, particularly if I don't see them doing that to any other group, to any other state. I don't see them doing that for Muslims. I don't see if there's an Islamophobic attack. I don't see them going around saying, oh, how horrible that ISIS exists. How horrible that ISIS caused that nine, and how horrible that 9/11 happened. That caused all of this
Anti-Muslim.
anti-Muslim bigotry.
Yeah.
We really need to do something against the Taliban. We really need to do something. They don't do that. They never do that.
Yeah. So like,
Okay.
in other words, if you made the argument that like, but some people have made the argument that like the terrorism by Al Qaeda or ISIS has caused massive increase in anti-Muslim bias, and you have now you have some organizations that like CARE, the Council on Islamic and American Islam. I forget the exact name of that organization. That I feel like sometimes does some sweeping, but you do have some groups I think that like that meaningfully say that this shit like doesn't represent Islam and they blaspheme Islam. Very memorably, I think not Washington. Holy fuck, George Bush said, you blaspheme Islam or whatever when you take these actions. And so, I hear you on that. I think it depends on the person, but no, that would be something that would raise my credence as well, 100%.
Yeah, especially if you saw like every time it's like you see this commenter, this replier guy going out every time there's an anti-Arab or Islamophobic attack. They're like, man, it's so horrible that ISIS exists again. It's so horrible that the Taliban. It's so horrible that that Islamic terrorism exists. That's that Islamic terrorism causing the Americans to hate Muslims.
And explain the pathway there, because those statements are the kinds of statements
they don't do it. They don't do it for any other group. It's so obvious that they have this that they're doing it. They're only doing this rechanneling of this. Oh my gosh, rechanneling all the sympathy for this Muslim person, rechanneling all the anger to the Muslim's assailant,
but
rechanneling it to Muslims.
And it's not explained by anti-Israel bias because
it's not, or it's not explained by. It's not explained by. Yeah. Wait. I'm doing it in the example where someone's doing it against Muslims.
Oh, yeah.
Against. It's not explained. It's not explained by anti-Taliban bias. It's not explained it's not explained by mere anti-terrorist bias, because the people who do that, they're not doing that against settler terrorism. They're not doing that against other forms. They're not doing that against atrocities committed by Israel. They're doing this. And it's very clear when you look at the people who are doing this. It's very rare that you see them doing it for both sides. They're only doing it for one. And it's not merely terrorism that's explaining this. Same thing for people who are doing this, the reply guys that are doing this with Jewish people. When Jewish people are attacked, they're like, oh man, state of Israel again, state of Israel causing Americans.
Something that would change the magnitude of how you would perceive that is, let's say someone said, well, I don't know about all this stuff. And let's say you believe them. I only focus on terrorism attacks in America. And in America, it seems like, and so that's why I'm not calling out.
Fuck.
Sorry, you keep...
1 2 3 1 2 3. Hello. Testing.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Let's say that someone provides a rationale that you believe. Well, the reason I haven't called out this other terrorism and done this thing is I didn't know about that. Let's say that you believe them, or I only focus on shit that happens in America to the extent that like America is the set.
Yeah,
if you believe them, mitigating.
Yeah, there's both. Wait, no, but there's both. First of all, there's a number of reasons. I mean, I'll get to the general strategy.
Yeah.
But in that particular case, that fails on a number of things. First of all, there are terroristic hate crimes that are committed against both Muslims and Jews in
America.
The United States.
100%. No,
in America, in America, and the question is the question is why are you aware? So the first thing is the awareness thing. Isn't it interesting that you only seem to be aware of one of those and you don't ever seem to be aware of the other? Well, again, if what best explains their lack of awareness for one and the other is just the race,
right? Then the awareness aspect,
and that is actually an anti. Yeah, that's turtles all the way down. Now the other thing is like and just so you know, with auxiliary hypotheses in general, if you start the more auxiliary hypotheses you stack in, because there could be plausible auxiliary hypotheses that exonerate someone, but the more you do that, the more you tie that into your theory, the more the overall credence of your theory goes down, because now your theory of your rival hypothesis needs to be true, and any of the other auxiliary hypotheses for any of the times, any of the carve outs, it doesn't really match, also has to be true. the overall probability goes down.
It's kind of like explaining the a theory of the world's shape, that maybe you can have in isolation some explanation that accounts for the seasons or something, but when you try to make sense of all the other phenomena that you're experiencing, you want something that explains.
You have to start stacking on other things. Yeah, there's a normie term for this. It's called mental gymnastics.
Yeah.
Right. You can go. So yeah, if you have to start every okay, well in this case, well why didn't I do it for when the person who goes and does the, let's just call it the the sweep, like the sweep that we're talking about, the reply guy sweep, that reply guy sweep we're talking about. Well, why didn't they do that they say it's for terrorism? Okay, well there was a pretty terroristic attack against a Muslim here. Why didn't they do that? They weren't aware. They weren't aware of War's work. Because they, it was a while ago. Okay, well, why didn't they do it on this one that was more soon? Because they didn't have their coffee that day. Okay, well, why didn't they do it against this other one? Because they didn't think it rose to the same level. Only 2 people were killed, and they only do it for 3 people killed. Like, you see, this is starting to get
Mehdi Hasan's argument on like Shapiro and shit on that front.
What is
on the anti-Arab?
I don't know.
Okay. So like, we have some statements from Shapiro where he says, what did he say? That like, hang on a second. That Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb, crap, and live in open sewage.
Yes, I think now I don't know if he's walked that statement back though, but yes, like that was what
he did. And you know what he said? He did walk it back, and you know what he said? He said, yeah, I feel really bad for it. I just didn't know, how fucked over Palestinians have been by their leaders who just want to destroy Israel all the time. Like, so he kind of massaged it into a way that like it's still Palestinians are responsible for like their own self-destruction, right? It's just
and let me just be clear about what constitutes an adequate walkback here. Like, so what does not constitute an adequate walkback? And this is going to be relevant for Hasan. What does not constitute an adequate walkback is something like, I regret
was misinterpreted
this because I was misinterpreted, or outright lying about it, or I regret doing it because it's given my opposition ammunition. So yeah, like I'm gonna stop responding this way in the future.
I would agree with that.
Like that is not an adequate walkback. What is an adequate walkback is, I feel bad about what I did. I had no idea about the situation going on here. Like this was messed up for me to do. I'm not going to do this in the future. Like that, something like that is starting to get to a good walkback.
And similar thing like a statement like Palestinians are rotten to the core. You would say that statement is racist, but you would want to see the walkback and the nature of it before. Okay.
I would want to see that. I would want to see an adequate walkback on that. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Before we get to the,
and I think we probably agree as well that like if someone like Nigel Farage, coming back to the earlier question, was like if Nigel Farage is standing on a stage and he's saying, "I've always been an adamant fighter against Islamophobia," which is why I am so angry at the cynical attempts by Hamas and the Houthis to make their attempts in attacking civilians into a representation of the Islamic faith. I would never, it's just so horrible that they do that, putting Muslims in danger in the UK with their rhetoric of victory to Islam as they bomb sailors, right? We know that's kind of insincere, right?
You mean the self-serving statements?
Yes.
Yeah, like
and also just like the I'm kind of basically blaming the people on the outside and for the bigoted attacks that happen on the other half of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Donald Trump said he loves Hispanics.
Yeah,
he did. My last one is Pisco. Do you know what takia is?
Oh, I heard someone on Patrick Bet David's show. Maybe it was the guy Adam. He was like, "This is like the Muslim doctrine of lying or something." Is that right? I don't know.
So what it really is it's for Shia Muslims, like minority Muslims, who use it in the sense of being a persecuted minority for over 1,000 years and sometimes having to conceal your faith so that you don't get persecuted or killed. So an example would be an imam in Iraq who's a Shia stops doing taqiyya, and so Saddam murders his entire family, right? Like, but
that's an example of what?
Online.
Of the
that's an example of taqiyya, right?
He
stopped doing it, and then because he's kind of like outed himself and his positions, then he gets fucking murdered by Saddam, and Saddam murders his entire family, right? So that's like an example of taqiyya, is you're doing it to escape persecution, like as a minority. Sure. Obviously, the Patrick Bet David types will just say, well, every time a Muslim lies, because they're religiously permitted to do that because of taqiyya. So
Yeah.
every time when the fucking Al Ali hospital blast happened, Twitter probably more mentions than ever taqiyya. Like, would you say that people who do that habitually whenever they see like something wrong being said by a Muslim or something they think is wrong by a Muslim, that they just say taqiyya, is that Islamophobic?
If they reflexively disbelieve,
refer to a misinterpretation
as a lie.
That they believe in as a false misinterpretation of that person's religion, that they, even if they believe in it, they reflexively just refer to it. They haven't actually gone and done any research into it in depth at all. Like similarly to how they do with the Talmud, they just reflexively throw something out without even knowing what the Talmud is. Whether it's taqiyya, or like, yeah.
I'm not sure if the ignorance is doing more to feed into that credence. Because I know there are the terms for like Jewish lies or Israeli lies or propaganda in American circles, and
but they wouldn't. But if someone said, "Well, wait," but because they rarely do this to one another, because again, turtles all the way down. Why are they ignorant? Because okay, if they're ignorant about everything, sure, I agree. If they're just ignorant about everything, but if they are ignorant about the Talmud and they just believe it. But when it comes to some sort of like Christian belief that may be anti-Semitic, they know all the scripture. And when it comes to taqiyya, they know all the defense.
Or to put it more simply, there are very few people online or people anywhere who will reflexively say taqiyya when a Muslim says something they think is wrong. There are very few people who do this and also at the same time will say Hasbara every time a pro-Israel point comes up that they don't like.
Yeah, I think the overlap is probably incredibly small.
Habitually, If you use Hasbara habitually, you are definitely not doing the same thing with taqiyya and vice versa. Which is why I
would apply
these
probably
expressions are usually
whatever the standard is there. I'm likely to apply it the same way. That is to say, someone who reflexively does Hasbara, and it really, for me, the thing that most moves me is like instantly disbelieving something. I guess the ignorance point also is relevant. But yeah, no, I would apply those things similarly. So whatever symmetry you have there, I'm sure that I would accept it.
Yeah, also just this idea that like lying and propaganda is like a particular country or a particular group gets its own one. You know, like they're like a special type of culturally or
if you hear Hasbara
lie, like taqiyya and Hasbara,
If you hear Hasbara, do you? Let's say that is a term, right? And so, what do you take with the term Hasbara? What do you conclude when someone is using the term Hasbara?
Well, Hasbara, when Israelis say Hasbara, when people who actually came up with the term are using it from the country, it typically means that Israel needs to do a better job at explaining itself on the world stage, like to their allies and shit like that. But obviously, to the very anti-Israel side, Hasbara just means like, well, lying habitually to protect the IDF or
but what conclusion do you draw from
propaganda machine, right?
In practice in the West, it's largely used as a way to single out pro-Israel propaganda as a very special evil type of propaganda that you can refer to that uniquely denigrates it over and above any other sort of propaganda.
Got it. So if someone said Israeli propaganda,
or even Jewish, it's overlap with Jewish as well. But yes.
Okay. But if someone says Israeli propaganda, you don't think it carries the same connotation as Hasbara?
No.
Okay, got it.
Because every country has propaganda.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, this will overlap us into Mr. Piker. Okay.
Yeah.
Pisco, do you know what double genocide theory is?
Double genocide theory, that two countries could conceivably do genocide on each other?
No,
I don't know.
So you'll only ever hear it from like communists or like pro USSR people. Basically, there's this whole trope that they'll talk about is that if someone ever accuses Stalin or the Soviet Union of having committed genocide, say with the Holodomor or the Crimean Tatars, they will say that this is a form of Holocaust denial to call that genocide. They'll say it's a double genocide theory, which is where people will try to sort of downplay the specific horror of the Holocaust and the specific intent of the Holocaust by putting it on par with the crimes of the Soviet Union. And they'll say that, well, because the Holodomor is not quite a genocide in the same sense as the Holocaust, the intent is just not as well proven, that you're actually being anti-Semitic or you're doing Holocaust denial to accuse the Soviets of genocide. This is like a thing that tankies or communists, like really hardcore campist.
Yeah, to
Stalinists will say.
avoid the genocide in Ukraine being labeled basically to sweep for Stalin and for the USSR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
there's also like it is based on something real, right? Like historians are much clearer that the Holocaust is a genocide. There's much more consensus about the Holocaust being a genocide.
Yeah.
There is on the Holodomor. Actually, I think most historians who are like prominent on that topic don't think it was a genocide. But yeah, people will take that further and say, well, because you're trying to put both of them there, you're propping up the other one, or you're by definition downplaying the other. Like you're downplaying the Holocaust because you hate communists so much.
Yeah,
and that's why they'll say it's like a.
So what's the conclusion there?
As in, there are people out there who will call you an anti-Semite even if you just say Stalin committed genocide in Ukraine. Right? These people exist. Now, let's assume this person believes that it is actually anti-Semitic to compare the Holodomor to the Holocaust, but they're happy to do it every time Israel commits a crime.
Sorry, so they're applying a
They're
different
happy
standard.
to do the Holocaust comparison to Israel. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are quite willing and ready to take a more expansive view of genocide, or a less strict view of genocide, with the archetype as the Holocaust in the context of Gaza, but are just, whether it's in the context of the Holodomor or I suppose the current Russian invasion of Ukraine, they just are inflexible. And that's not like the Holocaust. That's what you're saying? Double standard on that?
Yeah, to the point that they're so offended by the Soviet Nazi comparison that they'll call you anti-Semitic or a Holocaust denier for making the comparison.
Yeah, I think that would be a double standard that raises a credence. I think that I would grant that, yeah. No problem with that. Question for you, Avi. Has anything that I've said in this conversation meaningfully raised a credence about me being anti-Semitic?
No.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, LonerBox, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No. As in the answer to the question is no.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. All right.